RPG post games, in general, are not good. Are there fun RPG post games out there? Of course. But as a general rule, especially in older titles, the extra content in role-playing games is needlessly time-consuming, requiring hours of additional grinding, smacking your head against the same boring enemies for ages, playing and mastering tons of repetitive mini-games, all for the shot at doing maybe one bonus dungeon and an extra boss or two, or hell, maybe just stronger recolors of bosses and dungeons you've already played. Dozens of extra hours of time sink for what amounts to an hour or so of actual new content. Not that there's anything wrong with enjoying that sort of time sink. Coming from a Disgaea fan, it would be hypocritical of me to decry all forms of excessive grinding. But if you're genuinely trying to discern the quality of this sort of content, Mega Man Battle Network. Again. A sub-series of action card-collecting JRPGs from the 2000s, starring an alternate universe version of everyone's favorite blue guy in spandex. Sorry, guy who played the Blue Ranger in that weird reboot. Get owned, I guess. Though it might make things a little less climactic, I wanted to show my hand right from the go this time. This is basically a rant video. While I still try my best to structure out an unbiased review and intelligent analysis, I'm still going to shout and curse and complain a lot. If that bothers you and you're the kind of person who can't help themselves from unironically commenting skill issue when someone criticizes something you like, please still leave that comment. It's free engagement on my end. Anyway, yeah, I did not have a good time doing this and didn't really understand the scope of this undertaking when I offered it as a Patreon goal back then. I'll lay it out right here. All of the post games are bad. All 6 of them. After over 300 hours of working on these post-game videos in total, I say that with no hesitation. They have good elements, great elements in fact, but as a whole, they're a time sink that in no way rewards the amount of time that's put into them. I only tell you this as a warning. Not about the video, but in general. If you're curious about the extra endgame content throughout the Battle Network series, watch this video, or not even this one specifically, watch any video, and leave it at that. To all the Battle Network superfans out there who know these games like the back of their hands, I want to try to cover my ass preemptively a bit here before I get called a scrub. I tried my absolute best to complete all 6 of these with as little outside help as possible. I only looked up maps or guides when it felt truly necessary, and I never looked up any boss strategies, at least not until I had beaten it myself first. So I'm sure there were easy strats or glitches or something to help me at various points that I was simply unaware of, because I wanted to at least attempt as much of it as I could solo. Oh, and one final meta thing to point out to you. These were originally released on Patreon as 6 separate videos over the course of around 2.5 years. So the audio editing and video quality is not consistent. I learned a lot of things about both content creation and the games themselves as I went along. Like, the Battle Network 1 part is in 720p 30 FPS because that's all my old crappy editing software could handle. The Legacy Collection also didn't release until the time of the 3rd video, so there's no mention of any of the quality of life features like online trading or battling until Battle Network 3. Just wanted to let you know before you get really confused when the video and audio quality suddenly gets worse in a second. Mega Man Battle Network 1's postgame is the most disappointing thing since Red Sun. Being the first game in the sub-series, Mega Man Battle Network 1 was a brilliant clusterfuck of half-thought-out, vague new ideas that quickly became repetitive, chiefly due to a lack of variety or in-depth mechanics. And unluckily for me, its post-game offerings ain't much different. While a chunk of the later Battle Networks have entire scenarios, areas, and gimmicks tucked away in their extra materials, Battle Network 1 has... well, we'll get to it in a second. Before that, I want to lay out the ground rules. This video will not be created with the 2001 Game Boy Advance release of Mega Man Battle Network in mind. It'll instead be based on Rockman.exe Operate Shooting Star, a DS remake of the first game featuring a small collection of quality of life improvements and bonus content. We will break down this game at length when 100 years from now I finally release the spin-offs video, or more, you can just watch the stream playlist. But for now, let's focus on the matter at hand. The most important addition in Operate Shooting Star is the ability to play as future protagonist Geo Stellar's superhero alter ego, Star Force Mega Man, a feature that is unlocked near the end of the story. While Geo is overall better than Mega Man.exe thanks to his temporary shield and innate ability to lock on and zip to distant enemies, that's not to say Star Force Mega Man is a free pass to 100%. There are two handicaps present thanks to the previously mentioned quality of life changes in Operate Shooting Star that more than offset the buffs that Geo gets us. Number one, armors have been entirely removed from the game. You may or may not recall that the elemental armors purchasable on the net would have damage taken, in addition to protecting you from a certain element. So essentially, you take double damage in the DS remake compared to the GBA original. And number two, the big one, folder building has been balanced to line up with Battle Networks 2 through 6. If you don't know, the main difference between Battle Network 1 folder building and all the preceding games is the number of chips allowed in your folder. Back then, you were allowed 10 of the same chip in your folder, as opposed to the meager 4 it was later reduced to. But none of that broken nonsense for us, thank you. We have to play the balanced way. But why am I doing this to myself, though? So I can run away. That's it. You can't run from random encounters in the GBA version by pressing L, but you can on the DS. And when you take into account the aneurysm-inducing amount of walking in circles we're about to do, let's get our post-game adventure started by making sure the entire cyber world is opened up to us, so we can swiftly move between all the areas for future grinding. To access the bulk of Battle Network 1's extras, we're gonna have to delve into the deeper regions of the internet that go untouched during the story. Unlike later entries, which usually have special endgame dungeons, Battle Network 1 just has 16 identical-looking fucking maze rooms, so it's underwhelming and repetitive to say the least. Get used to those two adjectives. Capcom couldn't even be asked to label the cyber world in their first entry, so unless you have a map handy, there's no way to know which room is which number, making text-only guides more or less worthless with location hunting. And no, you can't just count. The cyber world is non-linear, and sometimes entering a door from Internet Area 5 will take you to Internet Area 9. That's not a specific example, but you get the point. This was fixed in Operate Shooting Star, thankfully. Once we get to Internet Area 10, yes, 10, the formula changes up a bit. Areas from here on are locked with challenge doors that only open if you complete the previous area in a specific manner. For example, never running from battles, or winning every fight with a busting rank of 5 or higher. Navi chips and the top tier swords make quick work of these, and I never failed any of them. They're not that bad. And in time, we'll arrive at Internet Area 16. A wide, empty square that, while currently unimportant, does contain a dozen or so mystery data crystals that have a high probability to drop late-game chips and buttloads of cash. So there's a mechanic present in all Battle Network games that I vaguely described in one of these fucking things, I don't remember which. The recurring concept of V2 and V3 Navis. Through a variety of methods, all boss Navis can be re-challenged after their initial plot-related defeat in a stronger V2 form. Deleting a V2 Navi will then cause them to be replaced by their ultimate V3 form. The main difference between these three phases being increased health and maybe a slight AI change. We're gonna need to win all of these V3 fights to complete the post-game, so let's get cracking. The most straightforward method of completing this task is speaking to the Navi's operator in the overworld. Each time you beat them, the Navi will level up, and you can freely challenge them as many times as you need. This works for Gutsman, Protoman, and Numberman, alongside the 3 bonus Navi encounters. Sal and her Navi Woodman.exe, who is such a cakewalk that I don't even need to discuss him. Miyu and her Navi Papyrus.exe, an acceptable boss with his spinning boners blocking areas of the stage if you don't quickly destroy them. And lastly, we have Masa and his Navi Sharkman.exe, who's about to have you catch these hands. Sharkman is a fight that should be a walk in the park, but is almost entirely decided by RNG. There are 3 shark fins bobbing around his side of the arena. Only one of these is the real Sharkman, and the only way to learn the real one's location is to attack it and see if he pops up and takes damage. The RNG comes into play when he dives back into the water after being hit, at which point he'll randomly select one of the 3 rows to switch to, with no indication of where he's gone. A craptastically frustrating ability if you're trying for an S rank. Well, that's all well and good, but that still leaves the question of how the crap do we refight the World 3 Navis? In another shining example of, I hope you have a guide, numbnuts, these Navis are randomly spread around the internet. invisibly. Each of them has a set spawn point, usually at a dead end somewhere, but you're gonna have to guess where specifically. Once you've found their spawn point and beaten them, the Navi will then power up to its V3 form and be added to that area's random encounter pool, with around a 5% encounter rate. What happens if you aren't looking for them and you're just trying to pass through? Well then, sorry, chuckle fuck! You stepped onto a completely innocuous panel on the internet, and now you have to fight a powered-up boss. Gee whiz, I hope it wasn't a boss that you need a specific folder to beat, or else you get to stand around and die. I, don't like this gimmick. The very first post-game boss in the history of Battle Network, Pharaohman.exe, is a snooze fest even at his V3 best. Found Internet Area 12 as long as you've collected enough upgrades to raise Mega Man's level to 70, Pharaohman stands out for being a bottom-tier Navi that I would put down in the baby pit with Fireman and Stoneman. Most Battle Network bosses that are tough because just hitting them is often more annoying than any other aspect of the fight. They protect themselves or teleport or some such defense method. Pharaohman bucks this trend entirely by slowly moving up and down the back row with no protection in sight. His attacks also are not suitably dangerous enough to compensate. He launches projectiles from an endless supply of sarcophagi that drop onto the field. Which projectile doesn't really matter, they all shoot in a straight line and you won't be getting hit by them anyway. He can generate a trap tile that does something if you step on it, but it's so easy to not do that. I'm not concerned. The only move Pharaohman has that can damage anybody with a brainstem is the Statue of Anubis, which bellows out poisonous smoke around the whole field. You can break it to stop the effect before it becomes an actual hindrance. Ugh, I'm hoping the next Navi makes up for this. After clearing most of the chip library out, we can meet Shadowman in Internet Area 15. While being the third time I've faced him, this is technically Shadowman's first appearance. Doesn't really matter, he hasn't changed much between the games, so I have little to say about this particular encounter that I haven't said before. Shuriken counter, exploding paper bombs, shadow clones, the works. Hold your horses, Skippy. You're not ready for base yet. See that bit there? The part that says 174 battle chips. That's our problem here. And it makes what could be an enjoyable experience into something I would certainly not be doing if I literally wasn't being paid to do so. Getting random enemies to drop chips can absolutely suck, but a lot of those empty library spaces are Navi chips. Navi chips you can only get by fighting the same bosses over and over and over. What makes this pure torture are the V2 chips. Yes, the V2. Hold on to your butts, kids. Each Navi has 3 versions of their chips, varying in strength. You get the V1 chip usually by just defeating them, and you can only win the V3 battle chip by getting an S rank in their fight. S ranks are earned by winning a boss battle in less than 30 seconds and only taking damage once or twice. You might not think that sounds outlandish or anything, but hop into the Wayback Machine and remember there are basically no battle systems in the first Battle Network. No souls, no styles, no locking the first chip slot, no dark chips, no emotion window, the program advances suck, the ad system sucks. Achieving an S rank is just a matter of using chips with matching codes and high numbers, all while getting lucky. There's not much else to it. Beating a Navi is easy. Beating a Navi with an S rank isn't that egregious of a task once you get a good folder going. Beating a Navi at the specific point where you will get their V2 chip is something else. You have to not do terribly, but not do great either. Just sort of hover around rank 7 or 8, whatever the fuck that means. How much damage should you take? How long should you mess around to raise the timer? Will you even get the chip, or will it just be money even though you got the correct rank? Prime suspect number 1 for this trash design is Pharaohman. Pharaohman doesn't have 3 chips, he technically has 4. His 3 Navi chips and a bonus chip called Anubis that drops when you S rank him. As described earlier, Pharaohman is also pathetically easy. Beating him in less than 30 seconds without taking damage is near effortless at this point in the game. So you're left with the only option of purposefully face-tanking attacks and lingering around the fight, praying that you get his V2 or V3 chip. After getting his default chip and Anubis, it took me 6 tries in order to get the next one, be it V2 or V3. That might not sound that bad, but to repeat, Boss Navi refights are random encounters. You gotta understand, it can take upwards of a half hour of running around just to get these bosses to spawn a single time. Then if you mess up, you just bought yourself some more. Bottom line to this endless tangent, if they're not going to let you freely refight the bosses, I think it's really dumb to need every chip to unlock content. Getting all of the chips in Battle Network 1 is tedious, time-consuming, almost requires a guide of some kind to know every virus's spawn location, and doesn't actually test your skill at the game in any way, shape, or form. Do not do this on original hardware. Save state, I don't care. Use an emulator and save scum for the Navi chips. Your time is more important than this. If you did this on a GBA, you are a psychopath and should be locked up. On to Base himself, finally. Don't get too excited. He's bullshit. That's all there is to it. There's nothing fun about fighting him, and I feel like I would have been better off cheating to get here. The fight is similar to story battles we've had against him in Battle Networks 2 and 3, but sped up, stronger, and with less resources on our end. But while those fights were pretty fun and enjoyable, well, let's break it down. Base has 1000 HP, unless you're playing Operation Shooting Star, in which case they buffed him by another 500. He can't be flinched, and his life aura that he jacked from the life virus regens incessantly, requiring 100 damage to dispel it in the first place. His attacks, well, they're basically all the same. He fires a bunch of buster shots in various patterns. His other attacks hadn't been invented yet, so they aren't here. I have to imagine between the armor, the busted folder system, and the whole 50% less health thing, Base is much easier on the GBA version. Even in this version, I could reliably get him down past 500 HP, which would be a kill on GBA. Program advances would certainly help, but since he's a random encounter and not a stationary boss, do you really want to spend 20 minutes waiting for him to show up, only to get bad folder luck and have to try again? I don't. Your prize for squandering away the last 15 hours of your life? Nothing. No cutscene, or congratulations screen, or hard mode, or new game plus, or anything. You just get kicked back out into the overworld. Your only consolation prize, should you get a high enough rank, is the base battle chip, which, since the game is now over, can only be used in multiplayer matches, and good luck. I feel like this might be the most negative video I've done in years. At the very least, it's the most negative video I've made about Mega Man. At least I had some nice things to say about Battle Network 4. I hope the other post-games fare better, or we are in for a rough time. The lack of additional mechanics, or the ability to even run from encounters in the GBA version, makes every battle dull beyond belief. Collecting all the Boss Navi battle chips makes me want to shove a fireplace poker clean through my brain. Unlike the main game, where you can pretty freely choose any chips you want to mess around with for fun, the rank requirements shoehorn you towards the very few late-game viable folders if you want to succeed. My abilities weren't tested, my creativity and folder building were not encouraged, it was just a test of patience and nothing else. Okay, Battle Network 2. That last post-game was the video game equivalent of stubbing your toe repeatedly after ODing on sleeping pills. So I'm gonna need you to kick it up a notch for me, okay, sweetheart? You can do that for me, right? So it's been like, a million years? If your life doesn't revolve around this goddamn franchise like mine does, you might have forgotten about the Net Battler license test throughout Battle Network 2. Though it's unlikely, as it's ground zero for the pattern of go do fetch quest followed by survival battle, an aspect of the franchise I've never really shut up about. And we've got a lot more of said aspect to deal with. We need the top rank license, the S-Class license. To get to later internet areas we'll have to visit for post-game merriment. We have to head back to the damn BusyWork side quest board and help people with several dozen menial tasks until we have enough merit badges to apply. Doing these requests will reward us with upgrades, rare chips, and keys that we'll need later to get to post-game areas. Trade chips, bring people stuff, delete viruses. You know how it works. Thankfully, I guess, you don't have to do every request. There are 2 that I didn't complete, but the S rank still became available at the Scilab Square. I don't know if it's a number of requests or a set of specific requests that have to be completed. And I'd look it up, but every single guide for this game is half wrong and contradictory, so it won't really do us any good. The S rank license test is, contain your excitement, a set of 10 consecutive virus battles. And only the last one is actually tough, so enjoy slogging through 9 battles only to get locked down into place and die. Well, alright then. Time to go fight all those damn roaming navies and get my V3 What the fuck is an army data? The star ID? What is any of this? Well, by using our new S-Pass, we have access to a new region of the cyber world. Thankfully, Battle Network 2 does have legitimately unique content to participate in after the main story, compared to the first game, which was just the same room copy-pasted 16 times. Go to Undernet 4, across from the Undersquare entrance, and you'll be met with a heel Navi who warns us, like, seriously, dude, don't fucking go in there. Sure, mate. I think I'll be the judge of— oh, my fucking eyes! Whatever this place is, you can't jack out in here, so best to max out on recovery, sub-chips, and unlockers, and save constantly. Don't want to have to come back in here if we don't have to. But we will have to. More on the Blinding Void later. We use the S-Class license to get through a previously blocked security cube, leading to a teleporter that lands us back in ACDC area. Or Den area, I think it was called back in the early games. The army data is in a locked mystery crystal that's just outside of LAN's homepage. Turns out it's been taunting us this entire time. But what about the Star ID? The administrator also said we need whatever that is for the SS license. Well, we had it this whole time, it turns out. The Star ID they're referring to is the gold star icon that appears on the title screen after completing the story. How does a nobody NPC know if you've collected a meta icon that doesn't exist in the game's universe? I don't want to know. That's how creepypastas get started, and I'm not interested in a hyper-realistic bloody Mega Man plush appearing on my bed. So fantastic! We got everything we need. Let's warp over to the Scilab Square and take our license test.
I'm going to commit suicide.
There's 4 black navies building a gang on the net. You have to find them in this exact order: Yumland 2, Netopia 3, Undernet 6, and Underkodo. Of course, they have you get the one deep in the Undernet, and then get the one on the path to the Undernet. They got some obnoxious virus battles, especially if you walk in with the wrong style on, but I'm well past having difficulty with simple virus battles by now. Wait, please, no, I didn't mean it! I don't know what I expected, but of course there are shadows during this rush, meaning that you need to have a folder with sword chips or you literally cannot progress, because nothing outside of swords can damage them. Have I mentioned these guys before? Any enemy that can only be damaged by a single chip should not exist. I hope I don't have to elaborate on why it's unfair to require a specific attack in a game where you can't change your folder mid-battle and get booted to the title screen upon death. Though that isn't the case in this specific instance. Then you have what I'll call gotcha battles. Virus encounters structured in such a way that if you don't know what's happening and have the perfect chips on turn 1, you just die. I love being panel locked. Yes, this post-game is so fucking good. I eventually settled on the strategy of using multiple roll chips, since their R code matched my swords, and stalling during easier moments of the trial so I could heal up. Aside from the 2 or 3 bullshit battle configurations, I did earnestly like having random encounters that actually tested me. I couldn't just program advance my way through the whole thing, and it was refreshing compared to the rest of Battle Network 2's postgame. Finally, SS Class license acquired. Now it's time to go complete the chip library. I've read guides that say a certain chip library percentage is required to take this one final test, but they all conflict, and some of them I know are wrong because they conflict with my chip number at the time, which was 186. So I can safely say that you need no more than 186 out of 250 battle chips to continue. The Triple S exam starts off with a search quest. The goal being to find the master of all navies and win a net battle against them. Most of the challenge is bouncing around the world following cryptic messages. Some of them hit me pretty hard in the old brain, but I haven't played this game in 2 years, so my faded memory might have something to do with that. Like this one that says to find the area overlooking different cultures, which means go to the Netopia Castle. My only 2 guesses as to what the hell this is intended to mean are, it's supposed to say a different culture, not different cultures, which would make sense because it's a foreign country, or the hint is simply referencing the fact that there's a fucking map in a room 3 rooms away from where you're supposed to go. I hope it's the first one, but the second one is dumber, so it's probably that. LAN runs around a bit longer, but we do eventually discover the last clue. My natural parents. What? By my natural parents, the game means your natural parents. They're talking to LAN. The game is trying to get you to go to Yuichiro's office in Scilab, where he announces that he is, in fact,
the Navi Master.
having been collecting the data of half a dozen netnavis for his research. Netnavis that he proceeds to throw at you one after the other. I am completely out of ideas for any more misdirect overreaction bits, so I'll just lay out for you that we're still not done. The second half of the Triple S license exam is once more a survival battle, the nastiest one to date. It is a 30-round horror show of top-tier viruses in the most obnoxiously synergistic layouts you can think of, like an entire team of viruses that steal your chips the second you select them, or turning all the panels to ice against enemies that lock down entire rows with their attacks while another enemy breaks the panels you do have. Or a team of two bastard-ass, bitch-ass dominards who each use Geddon, instantly destroying all of your panels and making you restart the whole thing from scratch. It is nice to have combat that forces you to think on your feet, strategizing on the fly, and building a folder that can handle any situation. But this is still absurdity. This shit takes a half hour to complete, provided you do complete it and don't die 20 minutes in, sending you back to square one. I know I said I wouldn't go through the trouble of discussing the library completion for all 6 games, but there's some specific aspects of this game's chip collection that really drive me up the damn wall. I thought the main source of my ranking-related problems was my terrible folder building from way back when I first started these reviews, and it's certainly that, but it's also because I had next to nothing to work with when I came back for this post-game. 99% of the chips I only own one copy of, and none of the good ones match each other. Battle Network 2 in general has a battle chip problem, actually. The chips are just bad individually, unless we're counting the secret chips that you can't even get legitimately anyway. Outside of program advances, most top-tier chips barely scrape 100 damage, and almost all of them that do are melee chips with gimped range, or throwable chips that are far too slow to hit anything. The flip side of this is that program advances are like loading a small tactical nuclear device into your arm. Life Sword 2 and Life Sword 3 deal 500 and 600 damage respectively, and were my go-to for most of the game. Though I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention Gator, which always worms its way into these sorts of conversations. An infamous PA created with the Wind, Fan, and Gateman battle chips, wherein Mega Man claps those Gateman cheeks so hard that he barfs garbage at a devastating velocity. This does 900 base damage, and it homes in. And screen dims. As punching aside, we do still have to hunt the boss refights if we want all the battle chips. Luckily, Battle Network 2's addition of sub-chips really helps endgame grinding via Lock Enemy and Sneak Run. Lock Enemy ensures that your previous enemy encounter repeats the next time you trigger a battle, enabling you to defeat a boss Navi multiple times in succession, while Sneak Run prevents you from being attacked by weaker viruses, which also raises your chances. There's one thing to keep in mind though. Sneak Run flat out doesn't fucking help, as it just seems to turn off all random encounters. And Lock Enemy doesn't even have a 100% success rate. In my experience, it failed more often than it succeeded. Sure was fun when I discovered that on accident. Yes, you can just reset your game constantly until it works, but what, am I insane? That's terrible, terrible fucking design. 10,000 zenny a pop is nothing to sneeze at when you're starting your post-game chip hunting, especially when you have really expensive chips to buy to complete the library. And even then, you would need dozens of lock enemies, unless you're save scumming. Plus, lock enemy can't be activated after finding a stationary V2 boss. Well, it can be activated, but you'll just be wasting your money because it won't work. Once you encounter a ghost Navi for the first time, you have to leave the area and come back for them to be loaded into the random encounter list. Getting them to spawn, even after all that, is still an unacceptably poorly implemented nightmare. Same as Battle Network 1, it sometimes took me upwards of a half hour of spinning around twiddling my dick for a single encounter to trigger. And if you want an S rank, you can't get hit. I personally stumbled upon 3 options for S ranks in the Battle Network 2 postgame. Number 1, Gator. Number 2, Life Sword. Number 3, lose and then walk around for another half hour until you re-encounter the boss and then get on your knees and pray that your folder contains Gator or Life Sword this time. Actually, I had to scratch Life Sword off that list a few hours in because there's a chance that the boss you randomly encounter can't be reached with sword chips. So 2 options, which are really just the same option. The only way to overcome a boss's patterns and tactics and still get an S rank is to simply not engage with their patterns and tactics whatsoever. And thanks to my lovely Twitch chat, I can prove it. Let me show you something. It's actually flinching that affects your rank in this game. It's not damage, it's just flinching. That's all they count. That's stupid. That's dumb. These fucking games, I swear to God. This is so stupid. He beat the shit out of me. Why is that a mistake? But you said it was in every game, right? I could have saved myself so much time. Yeah, you still have to beat him in under 30 seconds, but that's not that bad. That's like 3 turns. I'm so glad I decided to stream. Guys, I would have played 6 fucking post games not knowing that. Do you realize that? So when I say, do not engage with the boss's attack pattern, I mean it. Use gut style, belt out damage as fast as you can for 30 seconds, and watch the S ranks roll in. You're still gonna need program advances though, so while this makes completing the chip library easier, it certainly doesn't make it any more deep or fun. It's like, okay, great, I have the most perfect, most powerful insta-kill folder imaginable. Cool? Now what? I still have to grind battle chips for the next 20 hours. Still have to fight every boss a minimum of 3 times. Still have to walk around for way too fucking long to trigger the correct random encounter. And now even the net battling isn't fun, because it's been reduced to selecting 3 chips from a menu and then pressing A. I either kill every enemy instantly, or just use full customs until I get what I need to kill every enemy instantly. And this isn't just because I'm abusing Gator. Whatever broken shit you personally decide on for post-game S ranks will be the exact same story. You need program advances to deal the damage fast enough. A hidden base of operations for World 3 in the deepest section of the cyberworld. Their self-titled area is the surprisingly brightly lit hole that the remnants of the organization have crawled away to so they can hide and regroup. The security around here is overwhelmingly strict. There are blocker cubes all over the place that can only be opened with the 3 different S-Class licenses. Never mind the teeny detail that jacking out from here is impossible, you have to leave the way you came in. So as stated earlier, fill up your sub-chips and save often. Virus encounters here are nuts. It feels like every single one breaks or locks off panels and has a fucking 100+ damage aura. But computer-based infections aren't your only concern down in these parts. The Hikaris also have their paths blocked off by Protectos. Oh, these English names are so bad. Strange, sturdy, black monoliths that occasionally replace virus encounters. Every Protecto on the field has to be killed simultaneously in a single hit in 10 seconds. Screen daming attacks don't count. The damage has to be nearly, if not instant. If you fail, you'll take an explosion to the face over and over until you die, since you can't run from these dickhead rocks. The game does, in its own shitty, archaic way, cut you some slack here. While there's no way to see where they'll spawn, Protectos are limited virus encounters with set spawn points, and only have to be beaten 1 time each. But I did it! I got through the World 3 area, beat all the Protectos, and defeated all the secret bosses. I don't know how I triggered this battle. There's a locked gate, but it let me through immediately, meaning whatever the requirement was, I had already fulfilled it. Perhaps beating the main story or getting one of the licenses. Ignoring that, hey, Pharaohman is back, and he learned from our previous post-game pugilism. His coffins are now a permanent fixture that block incoming attacks, and the various projectiles they fire are no longer stuck going in a straight line, with ratons and steel blocks added to the mix. You can see me screwing around, doing very poorly, and it's actually not my fault this time. I had my secondary nonsense folder equipped that I was using to just trigger different program advances to break the Protectos. Opened a door in World 3 area and was instantly attacked. So I'm trying to beat this undead schmuck with a jumbled folder composed of random pieces to 3 different program advances. Still worked out, though I do still have to collect all of his battle chips now. What in God's name is a Moltanic? Napalm Man, before his role as a partner in Battle Network 5, first appeared here in the second game. This purple prick unloads onto you with his Gatling Buster, summons controller throw-worthy turrets from the ground that eat your attacks and pop up at the worst possible times, lobs napalm over to your side of the arena, which creates a lasting burning effect and cracks the panel it impacts. War Crimes Man is the epitome of everything wrong with Battle Network boss design. He has almost every single annoying gimmick all at once. His health is too high, he's firing 2 or 3 attacks with different random patterns at the same time, he's cracked out teleporting everywhere at top speed, he summons secondary objects that block your attacks, he leaves panel effects and then breaks those panels when he's done in a game without float or air shoes. If they gave him a shield of some kind, he would without question be the worst designed Navi boss in the whole series. Not the hardest, just the worst. At the edge of the World 3 area, Lan and Mega Man are congratulated by fan contest design winner Planet Man, unveiling to us that the entire post-game area was a test by World 3 to find their chosen one who will lead them to glorious global domination. It seems they didn't expect the brothers to be the one to answer their invitation. Anything is better than Geneva Convention Man at this point, and Planet Man doesn't even move, so we'll make short work of him. He's orbited by 2 elemental moons that will throw out attacks that match their color, if and when you hit them, though they can be temporarily destroyed by their weakness element. Planet Man can also summon a little shmup-style spaceship that pops off at you as it flies around. You can break the defender pretty easily, but Planet Man will consistently call out another one anytime you do this. Oh, and I'm sure you can see his field is entirely gone. And Mega Man's middle panel is missing, making thrown or placed chips of any kind worthless. In the main story of Battle Network 2, Sean convinced the Lone Navi base to join him as a part of Gospel's grand plan. Mega Man and Lan came up against him after making their way through the distorted tower Gospel had set up shop in, and he was an uncharacteristically weak opponent. The post-credits scene then reveals that Sean and/or Wily were creating failed copies of base out of bug frags. The plot of Battle Network 3 implies this was being done so Dr. Wily could free Alpha, but he was able to strike a deal with the real base by that time, meaning these clones were no longer needed. So the true base is still roaming the net, and he's in a bad mood. Wait, I don't need all the chips to fight base this time? Hot damn. Let's see, what's he packing this go around? 2,000 fucking HP, you gotta be joking. I tried, I really tried, you guys. I didn't want to just use it. But how else are you supposed to do this? His damn aura is just too strong. You need to use program advances to quickly whittle him down while his guard is lowered. But at the same time, you have to constantly throw away a 100 damage chip just to drop his barrier. So it either takes obnoxious levels of folder luck, or you see, even though time is stopped during screen dims, that doesn't apply to auras in Battle Network 2, so base's shield simply doesn't matter as the first hit of Gator will shatter it. And that'll do it. The game treats the fight with base as the proper conclusion, bringing up a results screen and congratulations message. It pains me to see these busting ranks are from each boss's initial completion, which means these are from 2 years ago when I had no idea what I was doing. But it's a nice little results screen nonetheless, and makes it feel like a proper conclusion, as opposed to Battle Network 1, which had literally nothing happen when you defeat base. I should have known it was too good to be true. Well, I'm thankful that all of the story-based quote-unquote post-game content can be accessed with only 200 battle chips collected. There is one remaining super secret boss that only spawns when you've collected every other possible single-player chip. At that point, Base Deluxe is added to the World 3 area's encounter pool. Base Deluxe being the version of Base that comes with lettuce and tomato. Base doesn't have a V2 or V3 form, rather he opts for a singular strengthened DX form. He has a 150 HP aura. There's not much else to say. Gator can't break that without a bunch of attack plus chips, and you'd have to somehow do it twice before his buffed attacks boop you out of existence. As far as I can tell, there's only one method of S-ranking base DX, and it requires the one vital program advance that I haven't shown you yet. A program advance that is such an instant win button that I avoided using it until this battle forced my hand. Ladies, gentlemen, and NBs, Bodyguard. And you thought Gator was bullshit. Putting an end to base DX and collecting his chips, along with his life aura, brings this leg of our journey to a close. But that's still not it for Battle Network 2. Let's hop back over to the title screen where we have accumulated all 5-star IDs. Except I hadn't gotten the last star at the time of recording the video, so just pretend the blue one's there. The gold star is awarded for completing the main story, the green star is given for defeating base and clearing the World 3 area, the purple star is unlocked for having the 10 special chips unlockable through multiplayer, which were gifted to me by a kindly bridge troll in exchange for a cob of corn. The blue star is earned by performing every program advance at least once, and finally, the accursed red star, bloodily ripped from the jaws of the cyber world by possessing every battle chip and completing the chip library. With all 5-star IDs on your save, you can go to New Game and press left, left, right, left, right, left, right, right, then select New Game to access, then select New Game to access Hard Mode. Hard Mode is unique to Battle Network 2, as no other game in the series has an additional difficulty, not in the traditional sense anyway. Hard Mode is precisely what you imagine it would be. Enemies are stronger, and some battle configurations have been changed up entirely to make them more of a challenge. Had this only been a basic unlockable for beating Gospel, I would praise its inclusion. But seeing as it's only accessible by 100%ing the game beforehand, no, it's not worth it at all. Battle Network 2's postgame made me angry and frustrated beyond reason, on a deep level that is difficult for me to describe to you. I'm not the kind of person who gets all crazy and pissed off when I'm playing video games, but there are points where I could genuinely feel my blood boil and this bizarre numbness in my gut as I watched the chip I was waiting for not drop for the 8th time despite my rank being correct, or saw another random encounter pop up that wasn't the one I was looking for, or rolling the chip trader over and over to get the trader exclusive chips and just getting a fucking wide sword again. There's almost 100 more battle chips than the first game, and I was sure it couldn't have gotten worse than that. Yes, the World 3 area and the gimmicks like the licensed survivals were fun at times, and far ahead of Battle Network 1's non-existent offerings, but it's just fucking bad, you guys. Collecting every battle chip is garbage. Without a shadow of a doubt in my mind, the single most aggravating waste of time RNG trial and error horseshit I have ever come up against in a game. It strains my mind to its very limits to even begin to comprehend how this awful, no fun, guide required excuse for content returned in this game and will continue to appear for 4 more games. I get that you may think I'm zeroing in way too hard on the library completion, but it is so hard for me to focus on anything else, because even if my playtime was around 50 hours, 30 of those hours were spent looking up impossible to guess virus locations and praying to RNGesus. Yes, I know the obvious response is that the post-game as a whole is optional, and the only reason to 100% the game at all is to fight base DX and unlock hard mode, and I do think that's a vast improvement, but that doesn't mean the grind isn't horrific. We're here to review the optional content, not the base game that most people will experience. I already have a video for that, and the post-game being bad doesn't change those opinions. But looking at solely the optional content, it is by and large a gigantic rage-inducing waste of time. As I have been told multiple times, Battle Network 3 has the longest and most in-depth post-game of the 6 main titles. That makes me optimistic, but still means we're gonna be here for a bit. Let's quickly run down the usual stuff before we get to the actual time-consuming shit. Beat the final boss for the Gold Star ID, then complete all of the side missions on the Scilab request board, which not only opens up one of the gates to the post-game area, it also earns us a bunch of extra upgrades, chips, and Zenny that will help us with what comes next. The most important of them being the very hidden secret during the Legendary Tomes quest. One of the Scilab board jobs gives you the task of finding 3 rare books around the Undernet. But if you grab all 3 of them, then your brain malfunctions and you try to go to the teacher's lounge in AC/DC and talk to this statue for no reason, you'll be gifted 300,000 Zenny, which is more than you could ever possibly need to buy whatever to help you through the postgame itself. You have to do this before turning in the quest though, or it's lost forever. I'd guess that the rationale for such a wacko huge amount of money is that there's no way anybody figured this out on their own. Certainly not an English speaker. What you're meant to do is go into the key items tab, a section of the menu you never have any reason to open up, look at the 3 tomes, and notice the series of black boxes beneath them. Then stick those black boxes in the order of sea, land, and sky to get fucking moon runes. It says Haniwa, which is the name for the kind of statue you have to bring it to, which is still such a small, obscure background element in such an out-of-the-way area of the game that even if you manage to solve this riddle, you probably still wouldn't know what you're meant to do, and might end up talking to the quest giver, which ends the quest right away. This was fixed in the Legacy Collection? They changed the English boxes to spell clay, which is somehow an even less useful hint than Haniwa, but I can applaud the attempt. When you're done cheating your way to never having to grind Zenny again, go and gather most of the standard chips and buy out all the shops. Then it's time to sink into melancholy and despair, because while the content contained in the postgame has gotten better, the grind has somehow gotten worse. Leave your breeder jokes at the door, you filthy degenerates. About, I don't know, halfway through the game, a scientist will appear in Scilab with a huge bomb-looking machine, the Virus Breeder. The contraption's purpose is to house non-hostile viruses and raise them to help in cleaning the net of infections. You can find various virus families all over the cyberworld who can be recruited by Mega Man for this cause, at which point they are sent to the Virus Breeder and can be fed bug frags to increase their attack power. Each family is represented by a chip that the scientist gives you, and when used in battle, there's a roulette minigame to determine which of the viruses will activate. I didn't mention it during my original video because it's the very definition of superfluous. There's nothing wrong with the Virus Breeder, the concept is fine, and something similar would be tried to greater effect in Battle Network 6. Not to mention they're just so fucking cute, look at them! But at the end of the day, it's just another bug frag sink, something that this game does not need. And the end result is some okay chips that's moment-to-moment usefulness is determined by how much you want to grind and how good you are at slot machine minigames. Also, this opens a post-game door, so you have to at least find all of them anyway. Yeah, I know what I said. I said I wouldn't mention this every time because it would get repetitive, but Battle Network 3 does something so completely asinine that I have to vent about it. This game has chips locked behind styles. We'll start with the less insulting of the two. Certain enemies have chips they only drop if they're killed while using custom style. Not a lot, just like 3. It's like there's just enough to be frustrating and make you have to check a guide. This is a needless complication, but you'll likely be using custom style by this point because its extra chip slots help with PAs and combos. It's padding and dumb, but it's not a huge offense. Like I said, there are barely even any chips you have to get this way. The next one, though. In the prior games, Ghost Navis dropped 3 main chips, worded up until this point as V1, V2, and V3. I've yelled plenty about how this entire random Navi encounter system is garbage, and there should be a more easily repeatable method of re-challenging old bosses. The boss refights are arguably the worst part of every single one of these post-games. So imagine my surprise when I learned that the tedium has been upped for Battle Network 3, if you can believe that. As now, after finding a ghost for the first time, they will vanish into the wind and become a random encounter in a completely different area, meaning you have to find all of the ghost navis twice. And the second time, they exist solely as a random encounter with no set spawn point. This game in particular is also very bad about chip drops. I'm not exaggerating when I say sometimes I received a 9, 10, or S on a boss fight 4 or 5 times in a row, only to be given Zenny every single time. So thank God there is now a way to fix this, but you have to wait until you've completed the main story. There's a program for the Navicust in Wily's Castle named Collect. This program forces a chip drop if one is possible against regular encounters, though there are still many chips that can't be collected this way thanks to battles containing multiple virus types. You then have to pair this with the new Sneak Run program. Said Sneak Run program functions as a permanent Sneak Run subchip, which eliminates weak viruses from the encounter pool, which greatly increases your chances of running into bosses. But that's still not all. Battle Network 3 introduces V4 chips, a brand new chip grade that can only be earned by deleting a Navighost with an S rank in under 20 seconds with team style equipped. Imagine spending 100 goddamn battles to unlock a power-up you might only be using for this one stupid mechanic. And if you want an actual chance at getting those V4 chips, it still requires an S rank very quickly. So you're gonna need extra chip slots to belt out broken combos like Master Style or something turn 1. So you're gonna wanna have maxed out Custom Style to get the special Custom Plus programs it grants you. Then look up the error codes online and input them in order to avoid the bugs that are generated when you use a Navi customizer part that doesn't match your style's customizer color. And we're not even done with Navi chips, but we'll talk about that later. Also, I just thought I should remind you that you can only store one style at a time in Battle Network 3, unlike Battle Network 2 where you could store 2. So the only thing that could have alleviated this nonsense is completely removed from the game. Thankfully, this entire mechanic was shelved for all future entries. But you know what wasn't shelved? Bug frags. If you're shooting for 100%, you need a borderline trolling mountain of bug frags to purchase chips and activate events. How many do you need? This doesn't include buying any extra programs, no extra rolls on the bug frag trader, which I'll explain in a few minutes, and assumes you entirely ignore upgrading the virus breeder. So walk your candy ass over to Wily's Creepo Castle and relentlessly, mercilessly bully Gutsman. You see, countering a boss to death drops 10 bug frags, and this is the only reasonable method to grind these things. Version exclusives also start becoming an additional layer of pain atop this mess we find ourselves in. Technically, the only exclusive battle chips are from Bullman and Mistman, 2 extra bosses that only appear in either blue or white. The other version exclusives are some of the Giga chips, which don't count towards completion. The Legacy Collection's ability to trade online makes this step simple enough, though if you're playing on an emulator or original hardware, good luck. Once you have the Golden Star ID, you can check behind the Yoka Hot Spring, the same place the Undernet server is hidden, and find the now opened path to the secret area. Lazy name aside, this place looks amazing. The marble floors and the bright blue water surrounding the place are most assuredly not what you'd expect to find at the very depths of internet hell, but I feel the juxtaposition works well for creating an interesting endgame backdrop. To progress, we not only need all of the standard chips to clear out a few gates, but also a hammer hidden deep in the undernet, created by Serenade to knock down these pillars, designed to trap strong viruses. These trigger lengthy survival battles in case you thought we were somehow going to get away without having to deal with that again. There are also these smaller pillars blocking various paths to take out. Jesus, if you thought Protectos were annoying, be prepared to fucking rage quit. At the very least, Protectos were a simple concept. Destroy them all once and take damage every 10 seconds if you can. But these bozos have numbers on them and will instantly kill you if you mess up. The challenge is in the fact that they have to be killed in order, and any numbers that are the same have to be killed simultaneously. This means not only finding incredibly powerful attacks with very specific areas of effect, but also having to do so up to 3 times. You cannot cheat this with Buster Max unless there is a singular numbered pillar with low enough HP. No, you're gonna have to make liberal use of copy damage, panel changing effects, and Navi chips to have a chance at this. If you couple this with the blue version exclusive Giga chip folder back, which returns all of your used chips, then hopefully you should be able to knock all those bastards down with a little bit of patience. Just remember to be very careful though, as hitting the towers in the wrong order Along a hidden path in the back, you can also find the Hub Batch program for the Navi Customizer. While Hub style itself no longer exists, this replicates all of its effects, including the half HP loss. I'm sure there's some builds or something you could do to prove me wrong, but in my opinion, this is basically worthless. Hub Batch takes up a gigantic amount of the Navi Customizer, and also requires you to waste your single error code slot just to activate it, as the customizer won't accept it at all otherwise. It is possible to remove the half HP bug if you have the bug stop program from having gotten bug style before, but one, that requires you to have bug style, which will require you to grind out dozens and dozens of battles again if you didn't have it already. And two, bug stop is such a large, specifically shaped program, even when compressed, that between it and Hub Batch, it'll take up the majority of the Navi Customizer. If you happen to already have bug stop, I guess it's worth a go, but giving up most of your Navi Customizer, giving up your ability to use any EX codes, and having to grind out bug style if you didn't have it already, which you very likely won't, makes it a far more underwhelming reward than when it was a simple style change. Darkman.exe is, contain your surprise, based on Darkman from Mega Man 5, or rather, the series of Darkman robots. He's been jonesing so hard for a fight with Serenade that he's been forced to defeat 10,000 Navis in a row just to be allowed the chance. Why don't we Brock Lesnar that streak for him? As he moves around, Darkman changes to one of 3 forms, each with their own attack, a reference to the original 4 Darkman robot masters who all had different colors and attributes. This is even more clear when you see his concept art in the EXE Complete Works. His palette shifting and his imposing cloaked figure will hopefully distract you from the fact that Darkman has no animations. Not even a hit stun sprite. The attacks themselves, the freeze, fire, and lightning attacks, are just graphics taken from existing characters and battle chips. Oh well, another note in our endless book of how limitations of early 2000s cartridge space continue to royally screw over the Battle Network games. As our super secret fun time continues, we'll find our way to Yamato Man, localized as Japan Man. This has the unintended effect of removing his reference, as Yamato Man was a robot master in Mega Man 6, where his name remained Yamato Man in America. It's possible this was a case of over-translation, as Yamato is a word used to refer to the people of ancient Japan, or just things that are from ancient Japan in a more broad sense, which makes sense considering he's a samurai. He battles with a spear and can occasionally deflect your attacks, but that's about it. Back up. What is... Oh, look at them. They're stealing my panels. No, don't touch my stuff. Yeah, the battle isn't really against Yamato Man. It's against his endless legion of Newgrounds fight animation stick figures who try to trap you in the back row. So you gotta take this guy out fast. I am super pumped for this fight. I've been hearing murmurings of this character for years. This mysterious super Navi with an amazing design who waits at the end of what people have said is the best post-game. Even everybody in this game hypes this fucker up constantly as the strongest and scariest being in the cyber world. Oh boy, this is gonna piss people off. Serenade is underwhelming. Not bad, but not what I was hyping myself up for. If you're expecting a base level monster boss, you won't find it here. Serenade is, not kidding, one of the simplest bosses in the game. Now the fight starts out really cool. Serenade is portrayed as the merciful angel to Base's vengeful demon. So rather than overwhelming you with strength, you just can't hit them. You can't shoot them, stab them, you can't break them, you can't use screen dims on them, and it does make you start panicking at first. So you start dodging attacks and waiting for an opening, just like Base, and yep, there we go, now you can hurt them. So you prepare yourself to go back to dodging whatever onslaught of attacks Serenade has ready for you, but you've already seen the entire fight. Serenade lobs some zigzag projectiles 6 or 7 times, then goes in for their huge blast that leaves them open, and if you hit them during this attack, they stop and don't even get a chance to use it. They have no other moves or techniques. There is an upgraded form that I'll explain how to fight in a few minutes, but the only reason that version is tough is because they have 2,600 frackin' health, which is an overwhelming number for any enemy. That's a lot of damage to deal with a limited chip pool. It has nothing to do with Serenade themselves. But That's it. The king of the Undernet, ladies and gentlemen. God, I wish so badly that more was done with this character. They are too interesting to be wasted on one fight like this. That was definitely gimped for space restrictions again. After banishing Serenade to the continuity void, we can go to the end of the Undernet and pull back these magnificent drapes to grab the 85th and final mega chip, Guardian. After beating Serenade, they warn you of the only person stronger than them, a creature of pure evil that's been repairing and strengthening themselves with bug fragments. So why don't we offer some up to call this devil out for a game of face shoot? In a truly poetic moment, you have to equip Press one last time to reach our final objective. One final look at this stupid waste of space mechanic that's haunted your Navi cuss the entire game. Once you cross the narrow bridge, there's an ominous machine in the back of Secret Area 3. It functions identically to the Chip Trader specials, only sucking up 10 bug frags in place of the 10 chips. This device is a powerful resource for folder completion, dropping almost exclusively high-level battle chips, even the chips locked to custom style and the V4s. This means, in theory, you could just murder fuck Gutsman for several hours and use the bug frag trader to eliminate using the styles entirely. It would take insane luck and a bottomless sack of frags, but it is an option. I was thankfully able to collect the 3 custom lock chips this way. Granted, it took about 700 bugs to do so. Feeding this strange device bug frags makes it, growl at you. And once you've pulled 30 times, it gets really pissed off. So despite all of the doom and gloom, Alpha did not kill a single person that it absorbed. I guess it wasn't that big of a deal after all. After being spat out by the big red blob, Base no longer has any memory of who he is, being driven only by his desire to test his power against strong warriors. This is the excuse the rest of the series will use, so they never have to acknowledge his role in Battle Network 3 or Dr. Cossack ever again. I believe the implication here is that he was kept alive by the remains of the bug organism Gospel from Battle Network 2, which merged with Base due to his Get Ability program, and he was then drawn here by all the bug frags we've been using. It makes sense, especially if you remember that Gospel is the Japanese name for classic Base's dog Treble, and those two also merged together to power up. This is a Base fight. Most of his moves are the same as before, but now he can summon Gospel's claws from the sky and send out a fire breath attack. He has a 200 HP aura as the standard this time. I tried to fight him 2 or 3 times with a somewhat regular folder, but that constantly regenning 200 HP hurdle alongside all of his attacks dealing like 300 goddamn damage is just too much to deal with. At the very least, Battle Network 3 has a reasonable chunk of battle chips that can deal 200 damage in a single hit to drop his shield, so then you can break out the program advances. If there is anything more groan-worthy than this in any of the post-games, I will eat an entire boot. The time trials are a joke challenge that shouldn't be required to gather all the star IDs. After defeating Base GX, a collection of heal navis will spawn that offer you a busting time requirement for all of the game's navi bosses. Doesn't sound too bad until you advance the rest of the text box and learn that it only allows you to use a set of pre-made folders to achieve the records. You aren't even allowed to buster max these in the Legacy Collection, as any time you achieve with it will be disqualified. There are a lot of extra folders to pick from throughout the game, but the majority of them have absolutely no chance of clearing any of these. They look worse than my folders back when I didn't even know how to play. Some of these things seriously have 8 or 9 codes and tons of chips that are rocking less than 100 damage with maybe 1 program advance if you're lucky. And since all the trials are in the secret area that you can't jack out of, you have to manually run all the way out, go back to the metro, go to the beach, take the boat to Hades Island, get the folder you want, then reverse all of those steps just to try a different folder on one of the bosses. I understand that the concept here is to test your raw busting skill, but the time trials don't do that. They test your luck. Your health and busting rank don't matter here, so putting out damage is all you need to worry about. Either you pull the predetermined chips you need to do enough damage in time, or you don't. It's that simple. It's a pointless waiting game until you pull the chips in these awful folders that can actually be used together. You put on all of your Custom Plus programs and hope for the best. It's gonna take you an hour or two at least, and it's boring as hell. Although these fights are actually much easier in white version, because there you can use Ground Styles Navicus programs to force the field into a specific element, which will allow you to deal double damage with whatever chips you're using. This is a huge deal when you can't access chips to change the floor yourself like in the rest of the game. Like I said, it doesn't test any of the skills you've acquired throughout the game. It kind of just tests if you know how the snake battle chip works. And it's not interesting because we already had to fight every boss here at least 5 times already. And guess what? We still aren't done. Golden for story completion, green for base, blue for filling the library, purple for having all 85 mega chips, and light blue for clearing all the time trials. Once you've gathered all 5-star IDs, it looks like things might be wrapping up, but that's not quite the case. If you press this button combination on the title screen, you'll see the stars shift to the side, creating room for an additional 2 icons. This will cause the spawning of the Omega Navis, all of which we need to smash to get another star ID. The last one is for doing all the program advances. By returning to and searching the general area where you originally fought each of the game's bosses, including Base and Serenade, you'll be challenged to deal with a series of Omega viruses followed by the ultimate form of each boss. And yes! Thank you! Why can't more post-game content be like this? Just hard bosses. Why not just have these instead of having to kill every boss a half dozen times to fill the chip library, or that dumb as hell beat the clock challenge? Deleting the Omegas does drop a V5 variation of their battle chip, but they've been bumped up to being Giga Chips now. And because of that, they're all entirely worthless because almost any Giga Chip would be better than any of the V5s, but thankfully there's no reward tied to the Giga Chip library anyway, and collecting all of them does nothing, not even a star. So these exist exclusively for niche PvP folders maybe, and nothing else, since we're completely done with the game now. Well... This is the start of a new tradition for the Battle Network series. Once you've 100%ed each title, the final boss will become buffed, presenting a new climactic challenge to end your run on. In Battle Network 3, this takes the form of Alpha Omega. Yes, he looks exactly the same. You'd think they could have sprung for a palette swap or something. Alpha Omega is on the same tier as the other Omega opponents, and by that I mean he's the same boss with higher stats. His only new move is a golden version of the Claw Swipe that does more damage. I don't know, I didn't get hit by it. But besides that, it's the exact same boss, so the same strategy can be employed. Zeta Yo-Yo, baby! Blend that fucking Kubal into a delicious Jell-O cup. Well, damn it. I spent about 40 hours on the Battle Network 3 post-game in total. 40 hours. That's twice as long as the game itself. I could have played an entire different RPG in that time frame. And what was the incentive to keep going? The longest, most fleshed out post-game among the 6 titles? Like, in a literal sense, it has the most post-game content. The game has 7 clear rewards and 300 goddamn battle chips after all. But it's important to note that said content consists of 1 really cool area with some fun gimmicks, and 2 admittedly neat boss designs, but one of them is unfinished due to technical limitations, 10 plus hours of filling out the chip library, an underwhelming super boss, a super boss we've already fought multiple times and will continue to fight for 3 more games, beating all the bosses again 4 times, beating all the bosses again but with a stopwatch and heavy RNG, and finally, beating all the bosses again with bigger numbers. In terms of how long it takes to complete, yes, Battle Network 3 is the most in-depth post-game so far, but the vast majority of that is facing the same bosses on loop. And the exact same repeating, wandering around with a guide open busy work that the last 2 games had. It's making me sound like a broken record because I keep saying the same shit over and over again. Is it the best post-game so far? Absolutely. Not even really a contest. Was it worth the almost 45 hours I spent on it? Sadly, the answer is still no. And I don't think the next game is gonna change my mind. let's get on with this. I don't think there's any part of you that thinks this franchise's redheaded stepchild is gonna somehow redeem itself with amazing endgame content. So I'll skip the part where I pretend to be optimistic this time. Instead of continuing my GBA Red Sun save file from a few years ago, today I'll be playing on Blue Moon, on the Legacy Collection specifically, to make use of its extra features. Which, yes, does mean that I've played Battle Network 4 5 fucking times purely for the sake of making content about it. The bright spot in this situation, other than the ability to trade and library compare, is that I can now use patch cards without being a small Japanese child in 2004. I basically just used them to drown our buddy Rockman in HP, but if you're so inclined, there are more extreme measures available, like cranking Buster Attack to 15, turning your charged shot into a full cuss, or the pair of cards that, this is real, turns Mega Man completely invincible. And you thought pay to win was a new phenomena. With everything set up now, you might be thinking, hey John, are you gonna go in depth on the second and third playthrough in this video? My answer is no, but allow me to explain myself. First off, I've already discussed 2 entire playthroughs of this game at length in my retrospective review thing for Battle Network 4, and streamed 2 entire playthroughs as well. So there's literal hours of my opinions on all the stupid crap in the base game out there to watch, if for some reason you're interested in that. More importantly though, I'm not going to talk about the 2 additional playthroughs at length in this post-game video because they are not post-game content. I still hold the belief that they are main story content that's just split up in the most backwards way possible. Your first playthrough of Battle Network 4 isn't a complete run, it's about 45% of one. When over half of the game is locked behind multiple New Game Plus cycles, that's not bonus content, that's the base game. So, the bulk of this Battle Network 4 section will be created under the assumption that we have collected all of the items and souls exclusive to the first 2 playthroughs, and are now at the end of the third and final one. I broke this down in my original review, but to be brief, Battle Network 4 has a completely distinct progression system to the other 5 games. If you want to experience everything, you have to complete the game 3 times, with some scenarios you go through and enemies you encounter differing randomly each go around. This extends to the battle chips and items, very important things we need to 100% the game. This progression structure results in a ton of little annoyances when shooting for full completion. We can tee off with the ridiculous amount of money required to purchase all of the chips and upgrades, not to mention the multiple Zenny-based roadblocks the game throws at you, like toll doors, certain quest steps, having to buy like 15 unlockers for all the purple mystery data, which you have to do in all 3 playthroughs, or having to buy all the Sea Slider parts 3 godforsaken times because unlike every other purchased item, the board magically deletes itself from your inventory each playthrough. This scarcity issue also exists with bug frags now as well, because from this game onward, bug frags are no longer a straightforward grindable resource, and instead can only be found in mystery data randomly in the field and in battles. There are some ways to manipulate RNG into your favor to earn them faster, but you still need hundreds to 100% the game. Why make me collect them if I can't grind them consistently? What am I supposed to do? Take out a fucking loan? However, currency is the least of your concerns when going for 100%, as something far more devious lurks in the shadows on this path. And I'm not referring to library completion this time. I've explained in the past that Battle Network 4's multiple playthroughs are unique, in that all of the blue mystery data you collected will be replaced with a new item when you return to that point, and most of the enemies encountered will upgrade to higher tiers with each go-around as well. This creates the potential for a catastrophic error, as these enemies and treasures are not simple additions, they are replacements. You see where this train is headed? It is entirely possible to functionally lock yourself out of items on your 3rd playthrough by either removing that enemy from the random encounter pool or missing a blue mystery data in a previous run, which means that it will not change to the next collectible item in the rotation. Now, the chips are bad, but there are very few you can technically completely lock yourself out of. Most of these are specific codes that you'll need for program advances that just become impossible nightmares to grind when the enemy spawns are much rarer. On the flip side, if you missed an item, such as an HP memory or something ultra valuable like a Navicust upgrade, you'll have to collect the data you missed, then play the entire game again to respawn that data with the next item. Get the fuck out of here with this entire system. This isn't something you should even have to worry about, but it will constantly be on your mind as you play through the game and have you checking online lists to make sure you don't miss anything. I hypothesized in my review that it's incredibly likely Battle Network 4 was made as a single game's worth of content that was then split into two halves because Pokemon makes a lot of fucking money. The Open Tournament is not helping them beat those allegations. The Open Tournament is a side mode that opens up at Higsby's early on. It generates a generic series of tournament battles with default Navis at first, anyway. If you connect to other players, they can send over Navis that they've defeated during story mode to fill in the bracket, with each one dropping a secret set of battle chips that only that Navi can drop. True praise is in order with these, since the version exclusives are no longer required, and all version-based battle chips go into the secret library that does not affect your journey to 100%. But okay, extra chips, that's fun I suppose, but the fact the secret library exists now means I don't have to do this tournament thing. Why would I bring it up then? Well, there's something real funny about how this system works. Once a version exclusive Navi has been transferred to your game, it is then possible for that Navi to appear during the campaign tournaments. Boss fight, ghost form, Navi chips, and complete scenario included. For all intents and purposes, they are now in the game and act the same as every other boss. If this was possible, why in the name of fuck are the generic Navis even in the game? There's no reason for two versions if it was perfectly possible to fit all of the properly designed bosses on one cart. The only small pass I gave this back then is that it was likely cartridge space related, but as it turns out, that's not true. I get that Pokemon does this same thing, and while I don't think it's great there either, the games just swap around a few Pokemon and items. There aren't like blank repeated placeholder Pokemon filling up half the Pokedex. My favorite part about this whole situation though, you know what Navi appeared in my tournament scenario that made me realize that this was a possibility? Yep, Windman. Battle Network 4 was the beginning of this series' soon-to-be ongoing fascination with Konami's solar sensor-driven stealth action game, Boktai. A game I know next to nothing about, despite everyone constantly begging me to play it. In the campaign, this crossover is presented as the Haunted House area and the Gundel Soul set of battle chips, but there is another optional chunk to this little cameo I didn't mention before. At the end of the Undernet, a ritual circle can be found with a coffin placed in its center. Next to the dead guy box is a live guy, Django the Solar Boy, and his partner Otenko, the protagonists of the majority of Boktai titles. At least I think so. I'm not checking. Django and Mega Man quickly come to trust each other, understanding their shared goal of erasing evil. In this case, that evil takes the form of now slumbering Shade Man. Since he is a vampire, Django will need direct sunlight energy to make him vulnerable. So after getting the runaround for a bit to retrieve his solar sensor, Django will tell you he can't sense any sunlight. What the fuck does that mean? You mean because I'm not standing outside? Yeah, to complete this quest, Lan has to be standing at an outdoor jack-in point so the solar sensor can transfer light from the PET, which is an adorable reference to how Boktai was played on GBA, but this is the 5th time I've played this trash fire of a game, and I'm like 10 more seconds of being forced to backtrack around the cyberworld away from deleting my Patreon and going to live in a small cave eating berries and twigs for the rest of my life. Django unleashes his ultimate move, the Solar Pile Driver, and opens up the box, after which he tags out and leaves the Hikari Bros to do the actual fighting themselves. The main point of this sub-event is to free Shademan's spirit and open him up for random re-encounters, or rather, encounters, since all of his previous fights were scripted, alongside obtaining the Nebula code to open those skull doors that are all over the place. All of that grueling preparation time completed, including, I cannot hammer it on this hard enough, playing the game 3 times. It's time to get to the genuine post-game part of this post-game. A ways into the Undernet, there's a barrier that can only be dispelled when presented with 6 righteous souls. Translated to game speak, it means the endgame area is locked until you've completed the game 3 full times, in accordance with how the souls are coded to appear. 3 in the first, 2 in the second, 1 in the third. The following room is a small maze with the Mega Chip Sanctuary, a vendor that sells a handful of other rare chips, and Laser Man's ghost spawn point, so we can finally grab his battle chips as well. It's not long before we're stopped by another door though. The gate that halts progress until the standard library is entirely filled out. Yeah, we were close, but when I said we have to do this every time, I meant every time. Behind this door is the petrified corpse of everybody's favorite post-game punch bag, Base.exe. What hints of character he had in Battle Network 3 have been completely removed, and he's been reduced to a mindless power detecting Roomba that floats around the internet mumbling about fighting. Battle Network continuing to waste everybody's potential to be a compelling character because continuity frightens them. Base has actually received quite the downgrade in power this time. Not his literal strength or ability to smash your face in, but in the fact that his life aura is missing. Whatever happened to him after absorbing Gospel has corrupted him with negative energy, replacing most of his moves with new dark power-based skills. This is where he finally gets iconic attacks like Hell's Rolling and his dark arm blades that he uses in the anime. He's still imposing, but the lack of barrier and relatively low HP pool makes him a breeze compared to what we'll be up against later. If you take an alternate path through the Undernet that doesn't lead towards base, you'll be eventually stopped by a dark hole obstructing the way forward. There's a Navi elsewhere that mentions 5 dark chips in a cryptic manner, implying they have something to do with this hell vortex. One might piece together that this hint refers to the dark chips that can be found hidden throughout the world used to activate Chaos Unison. Incorrect, that's Battle Network 5. Battle Network 4 doesn't have collectible dark chips, remember? They only appear during battles when Mega Man is emotionally damaged, so what the fuck is the game talking about? Basically, there are chips that are still considered dark chips even though they aren't purple and don't make the swooshy evil noise. These chips also have to be collected and equipped, despite the fact they still only work if Mega Man's Dark Soul is active. To continue the post-game, you're looking for Anubis, Muramasa, Element Dark, Blackwing, and Bug Charge / Bug Curse, depending on which release you're playing, as these are version-exclusive Gigas. Anubis, Muramasa, and Blackwing are owned by 3 Navis around the Undernet, which only spawn after you defeat base for the first time. These jerk-offs are the source of our beloved survival battles, each one having a 10 stack of virus encounters to smash through. The layouts aren't particularly nasty, definitely not Battle Network 2 level, but by now you're playing on super hard mode, so prepare to take 200 plus damage from every mistake. This would be so much easier if I was still playing Red Sun, and then I could just use Roll Soul to grind my health back up in between each round. The remaining 2 MacGuffins are Element Dark, which drops from these EX Lamp virus fellas. I spent 45 minutes trying to get this chip to drop, and no amount of S ranks was helping, so eventually one of my mods just library compared with me so I could order it from Simpsby. And Bug Charge or Bug Curse, which can only be found by defeating Shademan SP or Laserman SP without cracking the green mystery data that spawns when you fight them. Collect your 5 chips, then strut into the mouth of madness to reach the true post-game area. Ooh, very nice emerald green. You would presume this is Merkland, the ghoulish, vile place mentioned in the main campaign where dark chips originate. Nope, this is Black Earth. What a total waste of a setup. Black Earth is a bare-bone maze of one-way panels, just like the Undernet actually. As far as encounters go, it's not much different from the Undernet either, with one exception. There's one enemy in Battle Network that I think is objectively badly designed. Not a pain to deal with, not an overwhelming challenge, just a bad idea overall. Do you remember what that enemy is? This guy, a shadow. Shadows are viruses that can only be damaged by sword attacks and absolutely nothing else. Black Earth is full of Navi shadows, which are like shadows but without the easy predictable pattern and baitable counter window. So worse! Your best bet is to run an entire folder of swords or just try running. If you're in Blue Moon though, thankfully you have the upper hand as Protosoul has an infinitely reusable wide sword. It'll still take a long time because God, they love to use sanctuary panels. Aside from a bunch of mystery data, the first room is rather empty, and if you want to move on to the second room, you'll have to have found and eliminated all of the Navi ghosts available in your version natively. This is because Black Earth 2 contains a series of mirrors. These mirrors house the dark reflections of the Link Navis Lan and Mega Man faced in the worldwide tournaments. Palettes are swapped, numbers go up. It's reminiscent of the Omega Navis from Battle Network 3. But Dark Souls have a sinister little quirk that will throw you off from time to time. It turns out they are influenced by the same invisible algorithm that determines how Mega Man DS acts, which in practice means they will all possess your Navicus parts and battle chips that you've been using throughout your adventure, on top of their usual repertoire, which for me meant a lot of Invis and Gundel Soul. Destroying these illusions conjures up the Dark Soul versions of each Navi chip, which you need to fill up the Mega Chip library, but you can't use them without being in Dark Soul, so they're pretty worthless otherwise. The Bug Frag Trader also makes its return here, which is nice to get the few DS Navi chips that don't have mirror rematches, but is useless for library completion as your standard library has to be at 100% before you can even get here. You can't even really use it to get extra chips either, because as I said, Bug Frags can no longer be easily farmed, and you're gonna any of the ones you do have to buy dumb library filler like Signal Red. The finale of this little gauntlet is a rematch with Dark Mega Man. Also, Hub Batch is here. To my eye, despite the circumstances, there's no difference between fighting Mega Man DS now and taking him out before Duo, other than his enhanced speed. It's hard for me to deliver a verdict on this boss or break it down since his entire move list and behavior is generated on a player-by-player basis. Mega Man's heart is temporarily cleansed until, I don't know, 2 months from now. But here comes my favorite bit. Once you've refought all the bosses in this completely empty nothing area, just like the previous 3 times, you will at last be up against Battle Network 4's secret navies. So at least there's something new to do here. There aren't any secret bosses, are there? Nothing. There are no challenges or puzzles. There are no rare enemies or hidden bosses. There is no new content in Black Earth. Even Battle Network 1 had secret bosses. Black Earth is exactly like every other part of this game. It's nothing but recycled palette swaps of shit you've already done. Oh, look, a recycled palette swap of shit we've already done. If you're playing a vanilla run of Battle Network 4, Base Omega will become a random encounter in Black Earth 2 at this point. He's just a stronger version of Base. If you're a filthy cheater, however, and are using patch cards, the disgustingly powerful Base XX will take his place. Aside from generally being more of a prick and hitting harder, Base XX has fast, shadowy movements that make him invulnerable to attacks if he's not standing perfectly still, alongside a regenerating barrier that he now holds in front of him. Forget any of that though, there are only 2 words you need to know to understand this monster. Shooting Buster. Shooting Buster is an attack that Base often uses in multiple games, and I don't care if this gets me called a scrub, it's a bullshit cheap technique. He litters the field with bullets in a random pattern for a good few seconds. If there's meant to be a way to dodge this consistently, I cannot see one, and it's far too quick to skirt by on pure reaction speed. It always has been and will continue to be a problematic move, but it's extra special now because each hit does 300 damage, which is such a shame because this boss would have been a perfect final challenge if they just took this move out. It is so overwhelming and very easy to get tripped up by, totally throwing off whatever strategy you were going for as your health rapidly scrambles down to 0. You can't even hide over broken panels because it somehow hits those as well. The battle becomes a race to delete him before you run out of invis chips and get perforated. Not easy when he's sitting pretty with 4,000 HP and a 150 HP shield that regens seemingly every time you stun him with damage. So realistically, you have to deal far more than 4,000 damage. Your best chance is going to be comboing into hell and back before he even gets a chance to lay into you. All the videos I found and my own experimentation leads me to believe the only real way to do this legitimately is with Airhawk 3 and a bunch of attack boosters, followed up with either Duo or Base Anomaly, a powerful Giga Chip. A little program advance on top, like Bodyguard or Solar Pile Driver, will be a huge help, but counters to trigger double damage are going to be mandatory as well. All this means you're reduced to waiting for perfect folder luck, and I mean perfect folder luck. Actually attempting to engage with these attack patterns for any period of time is a fool's errand. You will die. And you definitely will not be getting a high enough rank to get his battle chip. I spent hours trying to fight this guy. Remember, I'm playing on the Legacy Collection, and he's a random encounter, so no save scumming respawns, meaning there were often 10 to 15 minute gaps in between each attempt, because the enemies are just so powerful in Black Earth that sneak run doesn't work. The absolute icing on the cake here, though, is that there isn't even any reason for me to do this. Base XX doesn't drop anything different from Base Omega. They both drop the last version exclusive Giga Chip. You could also just use Buster Max, or Dark Soul and all the overpowered chips that come with it, or the tons and tons of supremely godlike patch cards. There's no reason to do the post games in general, sure, but there is really no reason to struggle against Base XX. There's no reason for this to be as hard as I made it at myself. It's purely for bragging rights. Oh my god, there's a fucking super version of Duo. Oh, look at his fucking health. In a more fitting ending than I could ever imagine, though not in the way the developers likely intended, the final challenge of Battle Network 4 is a 4th match against Duo. This is our reward. Once you have all of the title screen marks, head back to the asteroid comp and meet this gaudy golden bastard. If you're expecting any new attacks or pattern changes, you're going to be sorely disappointed. The primary difference between Duo Omega and all of the other versions is that if he hits you, it does goofy amounts of damage. You might think that sounds awful, but the real kicker is it's still a walk in the park compared to base. I was able to clear him on my second attempt, though just barely, as you can see. As frustrating as Duo is for all the reasons I've explained in my review, and as laugh-worthy as another 3,500 HP boss fight is, all but one of his attacks are predictable, and he's not even guaranteed to do that stupid face thing anyway, which puts him head and shoulders above NyQuil base. Let's end this so I never have to play this game again. The post-games being held hostage by the chip library already makes reaching 100% a very arduous task that I can't suggest to anybody who values their time. But throwing on 2 extra playthroughs to reach that same point, playthroughs where you have to make sure to gather every chip and every treasure in the entire game each time while replaying the same boring-ass minigames, obnoxious bosses, and horribly written scenarios at the whims of the world's cruelest random number generator. All of that for 2 rooms, more reskinned Navi battles, and an ultra version of an already bad final boss. Yeah, no, forget it. Legs fucking go indeed. Before we get going this time, there's only one side quest you need to know about before moving on. You're gonna need to keep an eye out for some friendly chums that have appeared around the cyber world. The game doesn't mention this as far as I'm aware, but by wandering around you'll likely come across at least one in a set of 5 black navies. They'll spawn in random, unnotable locations after obtaining the first completion mark, and each will present a beefy virus battle as a test. Once the whole lot of them are sufficiently bonked, it opens one of the many toll doors we'll find later in the secret area. Not a thrilling quest line, but it's something. As you'll see, this whole post-game in general is kinda short on side quests. We're not heading into the secret area yet, but best to keep the Guardians in mind and watch for them while you're roaming around getting other business done. Yeah, it just means standard chips. I don't know why they call them that now. Like Battle Network 2's Hard Mode or Battle Network 4's Endless New Game Plus cycles, Battle Network 5 also has its own take on increasing the post-game challenge, and it's the most different and confounding attempt of them all. One thing Battle Network 5 is infamous for is its awkward initial chip pool. There are almost no higher-tier virus chips available. Most chip families are locked at stage 1, even when defeating the stronger versions of those enemies. You might not even notice this until someone points it out to you. It won't be much of a roadblock during the base game. Hell, if you notice it at all. But once it's chip library fill-out hours, you'll come to the realization that you're somehow missing 50 plus battle chips, even if you feel like you've been keeping up on your collection. In order to remedy this gaping hole in your library, you'll need to return to the Undernet after completing the story, where you'll find a prog that offers to open a path to a deeper, more sinister area of the net, warning you that this will unleash powerful darkness upon the cyberworld. I'm glad that a random prog is in charge of the gate to hell. What this does is let loose a second pool of viruses all throughout the game, replacing almost every random encounter with a more powerful variant. This enables you to nab the rest of the chips you'll need for full completion. This also changes the chips that green mystery data contains, and there are far too many chips that only drop from these. Thanks to another lovely community member for library comparing, so I could spare myself the extra hour of jacking in and out over and over to get the last 3 of these chips I needed, and just buy them instead. I'm split on this choice. On one hand, this makes sense as a way to keep some level of player interest while wandering all around the net for side quests and such. It gives you something actually beneficial to do, and keeps virus encounters more involved in areas where you'd be effortlessly one-shotting everything anyway. On the other hand, this means the game has no natural difficulty curve. It's literally just a switch that you flip, and bam, the game is way harder now. Also, you're gonna be forced to grind out a good 30 to 40% of the battle chips no matter how you played through the main campaign. And because it affects everywhere, it makes it slightly more annoying to traverse when you're just trying to get somewhere, but all the random encounters now take longer. But after scouring the land once more, you'll be happy to see that your standard library is... Hang on. Where the fuck are all the 3s? Oh, shut up. Come on now, Capcom, really? When someone told me about this, I brushed it off as an obvious joke. Turns out they were serious. The first portal was already a strange choice, but there's a second portal further in. For what purpose? Level 3 viruses already spawn all over the game, but they just decline to drop anything unless you've checked what's behind door number 2 first. At least, that's what I thought, until I did some more research. Unlike older Battle Network games that have 3 versions of a virus, maybe a 4th one for challenge gauntlets, Battle Network 5 has 6 variations of every infectious gremlin you come across. 3 base variants and an additional 3 EX variants for each of those. So while you might be fighting the 3rd or even 4th tier of a virus, the game still counts it as the 2nd tier, so no chip drop for you. Once was a little weird, but fine. Twice? Dumb, pointless, forces you to go back to every area in the game and adds hours of additional grinding for no good reason. The only consolation is that unlike Battle Network 4, where you get permanently screwed out of lower level virus encounters, you can easily close either of the portals to revert the encounter pool to its previous state. So, you know, they learned something for once. It's not only the usual chip collection routine that's been turned on its head here.
Technically, this overall happened in Battle Network 4, so just pretend I mentioned it in the last part.
Navi refights are now coded as Alpha, Beta, and Omega, with the V whatever suffix being dropped. Rather than having 3 or 4 or even 5 different strength levels for each Navi chip, there are now only 2. Standard and Special, alongside a Dark Soul or DS variant. These allow Mega Man to still make use of Navi chips while in negative karma, something he's usually locked out of. The chip that drops is based on your busting rank as always, and thankfully, unlike Battle Network 4, Mega doesn't have to kill Navis while evil or rely on the luck of the bug frag trader for half of the DS chips. They now simply occupy the 2nd tier drop slot on a Navi's Omega form, so like an 8 or a 9. There's a record section under Mega Man's status page that lists your best deletion times for every Omega Navi you've battled. The lower the time, the more cranked the associated SP Navi chip becomes, with it reaching max power if you can knock out the opposition in less than 10 seconds. As you surely anticipated by now, there's a problem here though. This is just another round of our favorite game, hope you get a perfect folder turn 1 and try again if you don't. Sure, there's strategy in building a folder, but we're talking single-digit % chances here of getting what you need right away. If I was on an emulator with save states for rapid playbacks, I would absolutely have taken a stab at some of these. But on the Legacy Collection, where there's 5 minutes of wandering around in between each attempt, no. If you are interested, one of the best ways to handle boss navis now, especially if you want to be quick about it, is Chaos Unison. If you don't remember, Chaos Unison is when Lan activates a Soul Unison using a Dark Chip. They last for 1 turn, but allow you to use that Dark Chip indefinitely as long as that turn lasts and with no negative karma penalty. All you have to do is be sure to properly time the progressively quickening charge window. Chaos Unisons are almost all completely overpowered against AI opponents because of the sheer amount of AoE damage most of them cause. My go-to was Search Chaos and 2 area grabs. You can kill 90% of the bosses in the game turn 1. No joke, these drug allegories are wacky strong. You can perform the charge attack about 3 times reliably before it becomes so fast that you likely won't be able to time it consistently anymore. At least that's the intention. See, you can actually pause during battles outside of just bringing up the folder window. You may not even know this because why would you need to pause so badly you can't wait the extra 5 seconds for the custom gauge to fill? However, if you were to, perhaps, start charging a Dark Chip, then pause, you could tell if the spark is fully formed. Then release the button and guarantee you will launch the attack on the very next frame when the game resumes. But you wouldn't do that, would you? No. Not you, dear viewer. This whole record deal is an intriguing system for hardcore players and PvP folders, but I basically ignored these. I had to spend enough time waiting for enemy spawns and praying for perfect folder luck. I certainly wasn't gonna bother with more if it wasn't absolutely required of me. Hey, let's finally deliver on that weird one-off line from Battle Network 4. This is Mercland, the origin point of the darkness that infects the net. Well, technically the game just calls it Nebula Area, but it's Mercland, just believe me on this one. Also, it's just a reskinned Undernet, but I like the palette, so it gets a pass this time. Nebula Area is irritating. It's filled to the brim with progress check gates and is a decent ways into the net, so you'll probably have to backtrack all the way here a few times unless you use a guide to check all the requirements. It's the usual expectations: full standard chip library, almost all of the mega chips, 3 giga chips, yeah, sure. You also won't find hub batch here, like the preceding secret areas. It's not present in the base game at all, actually. It only exists as a patch card, but performs the same way otherwise. This is actually much better, in my opinion, as it frees up space on the customizer itself to let you better make up for the 50% HP penalty. Nebula area is also the largest post-game area in our adventure so far, consisting of 6 total rooms. 3 of them, 2, 4, and 6, are your expected walk around, find stuff, fight viruses situation. The other 3, Nebula areas 1, 3, and 5 are the site of 3 extra liberation missions, connected by a very loose story of Team Protoman or Team Colonel advancing into enemy territory to murder them Darkloids once and for all. Your party is set for each excursion, and you won't get to use everyone. Pretty much just because Gyro Man and Shadow Man would break the first mission, while Napalm Man and Tomahawk Man would break the final one. These levels are also getting irritatingly long, with all of them taking easily upwards of a half hour to clear, which is great when you don't hit the turn limit and have to play them again. But how are the missions themselves? I've said many times that I am a big fan of the liberations in the base game. How do these post-game versions stack up? Unless something comes along in Battle Network 6 that surprises me, this is the hardest post-game content in the series. Where do I even begin? The enemies do so much damage at this point that it feels like some kind of Kaizo ultra-hard joke hack. Mega Man is fine, but most of Team Protoman is eating 2 or 3 hits before they bite the big one, and these layouts are disgusting. Constantly breaking all the floor panels, lobbing stunning AoEs while other enemies charge at you. Enemies that can only be hit in small specific windows or with specific chip types that you can't focus on because you're too busy trying to not get completely obliterated by everything else. Invisible enemies that have to be hit before they even become vulnerable. Oh, and remember to hurry up, honey, we've got company coming over in 3 turns. Team Protoman is so woefully unequipped to do anything useful unless they get a really good starting folder. No upgrades, low health, no undershirt, no air shoes for half of them, meaning an enemy using Geddon dooms them instantly, no extra chip slots, no unisons. Oh, and I don't use them, but they can't use dark chips either. I'm not exaggerating when I say that if you make a single mistake with these guys, you'll probably die. You accidentally tap a direction 1 too many times and an inanimate bush breathes on you and you fucking detonate. There is one thing you can do to make this easier on yourself, but I'd rather not because it's just so boring. There is one folder setup that basically requires no chip combinations at all and functions regardless of what you get your first turn. The S code is pretty famous for how stupidly good it is in Battle Network 5, with access to a ton of Navi chips, swords, area grabs, and Air Hawk, which again continues to be one of the most busted standard chips in the PvE section of the game. Air Hawk is one of the 2 really good break chips which tear through shielded viruses and save you a bunch of time, and even then, the other one, Drill Arm, has an S code as well. Now, this isn't me saying this is the only way to get this done. I'm sure there are people with hundreds of hours in these games who could come up with better strategies than this. I'm not trying to be a guide here, I'm just letting you know what I did. If you do not wish to partake in the holy word of S, Mega Man's busted nonsense like extra folder slots and unisons, alongside good old-fashioned prayer with the other characters, are all that's gonna get you through these. Not to mention a big heaping dose of trial and error. This is where you should take my advice. Cheat. Do it. Look up a map to see where all of the items are before starting and what all the virus encounters will be. It'll save you the half hour of playing a losing overpar attempt that gets you nothing before you just have to try again. Why should you look up a map? Well, these missions are clearly designed to waste your turns to force you to play them twice. They're not only difficult, but also all require multiple keys to make progress. So even if you're not dying and losing turns with your characters, the game is still going to eat up your time. Keys drop from item tiles. The item tiles aren't random, they just seem like they are until you've memorized what each one is because they all look identical. Well, sometimes you can just use context and placement to guess at what's beneath each square, most of the time you can't. These bonus liberations like to either entirely fill the map with items, or place them completely out of the way in a part of the map that you would have no reason to touch at all, only for that item to be a mine trap. It's not just the keys, this also makes trying to replenish order points, your very important super special board clearing resource, just as dangerous. Is that 3 order points? Oh no, shucks, it's 100 damage and a lost turn! A hilarious troll! Well memed, my friends. My first attempt at Extra Liberation 1 came in at the exact par of 12 turns. If I hadn't wasted 2 or 3 turns just looking for keys and being stuck against endless dominers with no break chips, I would have come under par just fine. Had to redo this one. My first attempt at Extra Liberation 2 just barely succeeded, scraping by with my last character on the last possible turn. I had surrendered to the S folder by this point, and it paid off. The near constant presence of grass panels in this one also means that Hot Body, a great chip family that chains to nearby enemies, is almost too strong on this map thanks to the double damage. Well, my first attempt at Extra Liberation 3... Okay. You ever been mad at an apple before? This weirdly buff genetic mistake is in half the encounters on this map and can only be harmed by fire attacks when hiding in its crispy shell. If you kill another enemy while one is even on the field, it will freeze time and restore that enemy back to full health. This means Hot Body is even more important now because it's really the only fire chip worth using for these sorts of battles. This is also the most uninteresting liberation. It looks very open and strategy heavy, but in actuality, because of the structure of the locked panels, you have to take one very specific straight line to get anything done. A straight line that is going to involve tons and tons of liberations because the only party member with panel clearing abilities is banned from this mission. In Team Colonel, you at least have Toadman's ability, which can clear long rows of dark panels, but Medi's stupidly unnecessarily complicated and situational ability just doesn't stack up. Medi's twin liberation only works if someone else clears the panel opposite of her, making it, as I said, very situational here. There's a whopping 2 places on the map where this would do anything, and both of them require you winning battles while fully surrounded. Keep in mind, Medi is the worst party member in either game. With a slowed thrown charge shot, no passive abilities, and a laughably small health pool that means she'll die in 2 attacks to most encounters. Not to mention, to get any real use from it, you'd have to have Gyro Man fly over a distant panel, a character I'm not a fan of because his charge shot leaves him vulnerable for too long, and use his bombing ability to clear it so he can stand there and complete the line. So 2 order points and 2 turns against agonizingly strong viruses in bad situations with 2 mediocre characters. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I'm kind of venting and being a little too harsh here. Heck, if you haven't played both versions, this might still sound like a worthwhile ability, and I'll admit that yes, it does have its use cases, but that's not why I'm so harsh on Medi. It's because she's just an objectively worse version of a different character. If you're playing Team Colonel, you simply have Toadman power up your character, and their next liberation knocks out 5 panels ahead of them. So you get a far wider and more flexible area of effect, consume less order points, and or don't have to use a character you don't want to use in a specific position, and you only have to win 1 battle instead of 2. Why is the frog so much fucking better than you at your job? You need to do well in all 3 extra liberations because they all reward a unique chip you'll need to fill the library. And the standard reward is just traitor fodder. The DS version of a boss's chip, which there's no reason you wouldn't have already collected from their ghost by this point. I honestly wouldn't care about giving these missions a second go once I learn the enemy layouts and item locations. They'd be way easier at that point if I didn't just spend 10 hours re-exploring the entire game to farm chip drops 3 times. The last thing I need is to replay a half-hour-long minigame for a chip I'll never use to fill out a checklist that I've been saying since Battle Network 1, I shouldn't have to fill out in the first place. The game does give you something, I guess, just for completing each of the liberations themselves, even if you miss the par. Not that it matters, because you can't make any progress without the chips anyway, so what's the point? Clearing the first extra liberation summons a voice from the sky who encourages Mega Man to continue fighting the Darkloids. There's no direct indication of who this voice is, but they send you the Mega Chip Justice 1. This attack involves Duo's giant floaty fists, so it's all but confirmed that this is meant to be him, fulfilling his purpose to destroy darkness in the laziest way he possibly can. Clearing the second extra liberation reveals the second dark portal, setting free the V3 viruses, and clearing the third extra liberation. The Dark Lloyds the boys meet while tearing through the Nebula area constantly allude to a greater power, a pure embodiment of dark energy from which all this purple bad guy stuff is born, the Chaos Lord. Then Cosmo Man pulls the rug out from under you and says that the Chaos King, both names are used interchangeably, is a spirit with no physical form and merely takes the shape of the most angry, hate-filled creatures it can find. This is code for, oh fuck, no more cartridge space, time to reuse some bosses. The first challenge of the final gauntlet are 6 manifestations of Mega's Dark Soul, inverted representation of the strengths the Hikaris gain from their bonds. Much like Mega Man DS before them, they function off the Dark Soul algorithm, so they'll use your most frequent chips against you, including Gigas, so you best be saving between each one just in case you get nuked. This is a section that will be easier or harder depending on the player, but regardless is nothing compared to the liberations. Everything from this point on is far easier, in my opinion at least. The hard part's basically over. I got caught by some nasty chips here and there, but I cleared all 6 without issue. These guys barely even measure up to their Omega variants, so it really is just going to be a case of how mean the AI is feeling. I figure they're so unimposing because you're gonna have to defeat them multiple times within very specific time limits. Let's get into this. Let me make a point right away that these Dark Soul Navis do not give a status screen when you delete them, and the game does not mention time playing any sort of factor here. This is another look up a guide or get screwed situation. Depending on the total time it takes to delete the DS Navis from 1 to 3 minutes, you'll spawn a different end boss behind the flame barrier in Nebula Area 6. Better record these fights yourself because there is no in-game method of seeing any of your times. An upgraded Nebula Gray is always the first encounter no matter what, and will appear again even stronger if you take more than 3 minutes to delete the Dark Navis. Wasn't expecting to fight, the final boss here. I had no air shoes, almost no projectile chips, nearly all of my attacks required panels, so I had to give this one another go. But not a big deal with the appropriate folder. I didn't even have to use the busted ass event chip. Defeating him results in the voice from earlier congratulating the twins and sending them the Giga Chip Big Hook, which once again involves Duo's flying hands. Clearing out the Dark Souls in between 2 or 3 minutes calls out who else but Bass. He feels a little thrown in at the end this time, just for the sake of having him, but that's because he works differently in Battle Network 5 due to the mod cards. There's actually 2 optional prior encounters with Finhead in Orin area and Nebula area that only appear if you have Bass cross equipped. He basically just becomes very confused by you wearing his skin and decides to kill you for it. These matches don't do anything and only serve as bonus encounters. You don't even have to trigger them for 100%. The first real meeting with Bass is here. But possibly. It's not clear if this is Bass being summoned by the Chaos Lord or the Chaos Lord copying Bass. Not that it really matters. This Bass is technically Bass Beta, or what would be considered Bass V3 before. He's no different from his Battle Network 4 incarnation. Even his aura continues to be absent, so he's no trouble at all. Winning this brawl nets you the Bass or Bass Anomaly Giga Chip, depending on which version you're slogging through. Then Bass just disappears. In another case of good luck figuring this out, once Chaos Lord Bass is disposed of, it activates Bass Omega's random encounter in Nebula Area 6. Yes, he's still a random encounter, so enjoy running around for 10 minutes. Every time you try to fight a boss, you'll likely die to a dozen times. There's nothing really new here either, sorry to tell ya. He's the same as last time, down to Bass XX still poking his violent violet head out if you're using mod cards. He does have one new trick to pull on you, but it's more of a fuck you I win button than an attack. Bass still has Darkness Overload, an attack that I said was bad, but not a huge deal because he basically never used it. Not only does it seem like he uses it far more frequently now, but now on top of that he has a fancy new move, Chaos Nightmare. Now Bass has 2 almost instant kill screen nuke attacks that wipe your field, so it's very likely he'll use at least one of them, if not both, multiple times. So you better better have area grab and move real fucking quick, or enjoy vibing at 1 HP after an attack that deals 900 damage. He's still tough, of course. Shooting Buster is still only reactable by fucking insane people with 1/8 of a second reaction times. Chaos Unison continues to be absurdly strong against bosses, especially bosses that have been area grabbed. Once again, I'll also note that I only increased my HP with the patch cards and refrained from using any of the more absurd options like the special charge shots or whatever. I'm sure there's some crazy stuff in there, and I didn't use negative karma, so I'm sure there are more powerful options with the dark chips as well. Whatever buffs you decide to use, Base XX is still the toughest enemy in the game, but a single powerful enemy is also still a lot easier than 100 powerful enemies in a row on a time limit with nerf characters. If you could beat him in Battle Network 4, you can beat him here. If it wasn't for the fact he's a random encounter, I would have been done with him in like 15 minutes. Instead, it took 3 hours. By the way, you're just doing this for a title screen. Mark, he doesn't even have the fucking courtesy to drop anything. With base out of the way, that only leaves the last remnant of the Chaos Lord. Wiping out all the DS Navis in less than 2 minutes, which means you get less than 2 turns to defeat all 6 in a row, draws out Rockboy's own Dark Soul for one last rematch. There's nothing particularly interesting about Chaos Lord Mega Man. It's just Dark Mega for like the 4th time. I mean, he should be able to use Dark Sword, but in the original Japanese release, it's broken and doesn't activate, and the Legacy Collection is based on the Japanese ROMs, so he doesn't drop anything anyway. Base is the one you're trying to get. Dark Mega is a pointless optional distraction. I have a theory about this. I mentioned earlier that Hub Batch isn't in the game, and defeating Dark Mega Man in Battle Network 4 is how you earned it there. So was it originally intended for you to unlock Hub style with this fight, but it ended up being turned into a card instead? And it would explain why the hardest to achieve secret boss in the game doesn't do anything. This all culminates when you return to the Soul server and take part in one final spat with the darkness, in the form of Nebula Gray Omega. 4,000 health on an enemy with no floor tiles is a real big fucking ask. Base is a really good Giga Chip when you stack up attack boosts on it, but it targets panels, so no good here. I messed around with the other Gigas to find a suitable replacement until I stumbled upon Holy Dream, a chip that would have been insanely useful had I realized its utility 20 hours ago. Holy Dream absorbs all holy panels and fires a 50 damage shot for each one. This is the part I misunderstood until testing it. I thought it was a single shot buffed by holy panels, not a ton of individual shots for each one. By using Sanctuary, a mega chip that converts all of your tiles into holy panels, then stacking it with plus chips and full synchro / the anger state if possible, you can build an attack that deals somewhere in the ballpark of 2,000 damage, leaving you with Chaos Unison and your remaining chips to deal with the other half of this bozo's HP. The S-Folder's prowess shines even here, so why ruin a good thing? This strategy is really only viable in Team Protoman though, as Holy Dream doesn't exist in Team Kernel. So like, guess you're fucked? Sorry, I'm not a GameFAQs guide. You just have to do a bunch of program advances and get really good at timing dark chips over and over, I suppose. Man, these super final bosses are consistently way easier than the rest of the postgame. Well, that was a mixed bag. There actually wasn't a lot to do this time, really. There's no side quests or request board to fill out, and no New Game Plus to deal with. You fill out the chip library, and then it's more or less a straight shot walking through Nebula area. I suppose there's the virus portals. It's an alright concept, but it wears out its welcome when you realize you're expected to come through every cyber world 3 times in total, just for the standard chips. What a truly bizarre mechanic. The only reason I can imagine these are here is because, as I said, Battle Network 5's postgame is rather short and straightforward, and they wanted to stretch out the playtime unnecessarily, as is always the case. The majority of the time spent on Battle Network 5's postgame seems to have went to the Liberations, and as a huge defender of the concept of Liberation missions, the extra liberations are just not fun. Once you piece together where to go and the best strategies to handle each mission's distinct encounters, it just feels like going through the motions. The stage layouts are purposefully time-wasting and tedious when they're not flat-out boring. The enemy layouts are frustrating, way too strong, and overly punishing compared to any other section in almost any other Battle Network game. Your folder selection is pretty limited, with you basically being forced to use chips like Flame Body, Wood Nose, and Airhawk to quickly and consistently deal with these specific types of enemies. And as I've said countless times, 4 out of 5 battles per turn, you're in control of inferior navies that lack Mega Man's unique mechanics that make him interesting to experiment with and play as. Again, I love the Liberation missions, but I will not miss these post-game ones. I will stick to the base game, thank you. In contrast to those, I actually like the final Chaos Lord section. The DS navies and their time trials are neat little challenges that do require some decent skill, but are not too harsh on you for not pulling a perfect hand turn 1 or making a mistake here and there. Yes, I wish that the Chaos Lord was an original boss instead of 3 reskins, but we can only complain about the space restrictions so many times. I still think Nebula Gray is a perfectly fine final boss, and his Omega form makes for a fun final battle that gets you to experiment with chips you may not have used before. Even if I do wish I would have realized the absurd strength of Holy Dream earlier, but we made it out the other side anyway. And with the Dark Chip saga behind us, we move on to the final stop on our lengthy journey. It stands to reason that the easiest battle network will have the easiest post-game. Right? At least I fucking hope so. It's vital to let you know before we enter the final stretch that this playthrough here was conducted on the Legacy Collection, which uses the Japanese games as a base. If you only played the original GBA English release, you missed a decent chunk of the postgame as it was removed entirely. These are not insignificant subtractions, they include entire areas and boss fights. I'm not sure why this is 100%, there seems to be a couple reasons at play. Number 1 is because the postgame involves Boktai again, but because Boktai 3 didn't come to the West, rather than localize that part anyway, they said fuck it and just ripped up and rearranged some other rooms to cobble together a functioning postgame area. Our eternal rival, limited cartridge space, might also have had something to do with why they didn't even bother trying. Remember that Battle Network 5 had already encountered this problem with having to remove multiple rooms from the English release. Now, I'll actually start by saying I have to give Battle Network 6 some credit, as they did implement a couple new systems to try and cut back on the wandering about. Well, I mean, they added the Lev bus to replace the subway, which is an unskippable 15-second cutscene every time you need to go somewhere. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that this animation alone probably adds a half hour to your total playtime. But aside from that, they tried to make travel a little easier. Land still has the links to each area that you can add to the homepage once you visit there. The net itself is designed as a branching web rather than a glorified straight line, with all major areas stemming off of the plaza in Central Area 3, and they've also added a handful of placeable shortcuts in the form of rush tiles. In Battle Network 6, there's a Navi who will sell you bones that you can use in front of these specially marked tiles to summon that number of rushes to fill the gap and create traversable platforms. I love this as a concept because it makes getting around faster, but only to places you've already been, and it has a cost associated with it, so I think it's a fair trade. Unfortunately, I think only like 3 of these create actual time-saving shortcuts, with the rest being little more than elaborately disguised keys to reach other items. And on the subject of elaborately designed keys, the cyberworld is chock full of an assortment of elemental barriers that require link navies to dispel. Each link navi can get past 2 of the 5 types of barrier. I think I mentioned these briefly in my Battle Network 6 video, but to reiterate, not only does this mean dragging multiple navies around the entire damn world, but unlike Mega Man, link navies can only be operated from their single set spawn point, so you'll have to run them from wherever the game starts them all the way to wherever you need them to be, which is a shame because, and I know I'm a broken record for saying shit like this, it's a cool idea for a mechanic, but like the Link Navis in general, it suffers from the inability to switch characters on the fly, which would have made the entire Link feature more dynamic, usable, and interesting. Why would I go out of my way to play as characters who are objectively worse than Mega Man in every metric? The poor implementation of the Link Navis reaches its backtracking peak when you have to enter the post-game area for the first time, but we're gonna talk about this more in a little bit, because it gets really bad. After a 2-title absence, the request board makes its, well, not triumphant return. It's back. Let's just say that. Nothing special or notable to go into here. The quests are the same as they ever were. Go to places, talk to multiple people in dialogue chains, give people money and chips or whatever. There's a lot of them, especially with the extras added by the e-reader cards. But none of them are terrible or poorly designed or overstay their welcome, except one. A lot of you know where this was going. The Anubis glitch, a game-ending error that's been infamous among the series fans for years. Since the Legacy Collection uses the Japanese games as a base, that means that this oversight is still encounterable despite not existing in the original English release. Self-research is an optional mission where the brothers are asked to learn the combination for a poison-based program advance and teach it to someone. The only PA that fits the bill is Poison Pharaoh, which requires the Anubis battle chip. The only Anubis chip in the game is held in Graveyard Area 2. Graveyard is Battle Network 6 post-game area, so as you're used to by now, it's full of doors that are opened by fulfilling various conditions. Getting into this particular section requires all of the mega chips, but there's a huge chance to screw yourself here, and it's Eugene's fault. The most common mega chips are the Navi chips, and one of the Navi chip sets in the game comes from Protoman. Unlike the other bosses, Protoman doesn't get stronger from simply rebattling him. The only way to level up Protoman to his max power form and make him drop his best chips is by completing the majority of help quests on the job board. Now, one more piece of info for you, and I believe you can come upon where the problem lies. Jobs from the request board cannot be cancelled. You have to complete them once accepted, and can only accept one at a time. Did you figure it out? If you select this quest before completing enough quests to fully level up Protoman, you have now soft-locked your save. You can't open the door without Protoman's chips, but you can't complete other requests to get Protoman's chips unless you open the door and finish the quest you're already doing. The only way to escape this self-imposed lockdown is to cheat. You have to have someone link up to get you the chips you need, meaning you have to know someone who's already played the entire postgame, or use the patch card, which grants you all 3 of Protoman's Navi chips. Now, in the Legacy Collection, this is a non-issue, as you have readily available access to all patch cards. In fact, the card that activates the quest itself warns you about this exact oversight if you read it. It's also technically possible for it to drop from a gold mystery data, but I sometimes go entire playthroughs of Battle Network games without seeing a single gold data. Good luck grinding for them in one specific spot for one specific chip. You could just replay the entire main story in a shorter amount of time, and I'm only kind of joking about that. There's a Navi that spawns in at one of the school boards that recruits you into a virus fighting circuit that's sprung up around Cyber City as of late. The competition takes the form of 5 tournaments of increasing skill level, where 2 teams of domesticated viruses compete to win a series of consecutive battles and earn all 5 rewards. Some of these rewards slap another chip into your folder that can only be obtained this way, making the virus battler mandatory. First off, you'll need some viruses to participate, but they don't have a predetermined spawn, nor are they capturable with a Navi program or anything of the sort. To befriend a new virus, you have to defeat a rare breed of that virus. Usually they look silver or gold. These will only start to appear after beating that specific race of viruses 16 times? That's what the Rockman EXE zone says, and I trust them, but is this requirement totally arbitrary, or is this some Japanese number pun or something? You won't be at all shaken when I tell you that these possible virus buddies are in random cyber worlds around the game that you just have to hope you blindly fall into while doing other stuff. While a type of virus may spawn all throughout the game, the recruitable version will only appear in a single specific room. Once you've partnered with a handful of buggy pals, you can start hammering away at these tournaments. Each round begins with a cap of 60 megabytes. Each virus has a memory value, and you can only deploy viruses that are below that 60 megabyte cap when counted together. This creates a trade-off between multiple weaker viruses or fewer strong viruses. You then place your pieces on the field and watch the little suckers go at it. There is 0 player input allowed during combat, and you guys know how much I love that. The HP of both sides is pooled into 1 health counter each, and the winner is the first to delete the opposing side before the custom gauge fills. If you don't, it counts as a tie no matter how much of a lead you had, and you'll be ejected from the bracket and have to start all over again, which means playing safe is not a choice. But the game does seem to have been purposefully built in such a way that any other super obvious easy strategies are killed by the AI. Some viruses have arbitrary ranges for their activation or irritating nerfs to their intelligence, like Honey Bomber, who seems to refuse to fire even when attacked at times, or my precious son Bombcorn, who will sometimes lock onto enemies as he does against Mega Man, and sometimes fire at absolutely nothing. On the opposite end, some of the viruses are also not balanced for this mode and only cause frustration. Yes, I'm talking about Pulse Bulb. Any enemy that has a limited hitbox is totally busted in this mode, as it's very unlikely the viruses will attack in the small second-long window of vulnerability. Pulse Bulbs also have random movement, so setting up your viruses in a certain spot does nothing to help you. I'm not kidding, these guys cost me over an hour of grinding for new viruses to use and failing Tournament 4 again and again. Fuck Pulse Bulb, all my homies hate Pulse Bulb. I was stuck here no matter what I did or what guides I checked, until I found out there is one virus that obliterates this entire event. Earth Dragon. Because it has 200 HP and deals 100 piercing damage over 6 panels, it's basically a free win code. You have to go through a chunk of the postgame to even get to where it spawns, but it's worth it to just blow your way through this and move on. The Virus Battler is an alright distraction, aside from that 4th tournament. It is kind of interesting to see how the different viruses interact against each other, but really this whole side quest is just another excuse to grind for something else that requires a guide at the end of the day. When checking around a green area during the main story, you surely took note of a large tree in the center. If you examine it from behind, Mega will notice a portal of some sort that leads straight to the Undernet. You can come here at any point once green area is open, but I would highly advise against such a thing. You will very likely be killed if you show up with 400 HP and a bunch of high cannons. The warp leads to a small path ending in a gravestone, the resting place of the God of Destruction. Oh, wonderful, you may be thinking. A secret boss available so early? Let's see what Robot Master has been redesigned this time. Oh, it's just you. Alright, come here. Let Saito-kun give you the attention you're begging for, Forte-chan. This version of Base brings into sharp focus just how ludicrously OP Mega Man is in Battle Network 6. I accidentally entered this battle with the wrong folder equipped and unusable disaster of random program advanced parts, and still beat him handily, easily face-tanking my way through an 1800 HP boss like it was nothing. The crosses and Beast Out are so incredibly overwhelming on their own that battle chips are hardly even required. You just have so many options in this game that none of the post-game super bosses are gonna be much of a hassle. Certainly not compared to some of the other psychopaths we've gone up against in the past. Trust me, this is not a complaint. The sheer stupid power you can load Mega Man up with in this game is one of the best parts, and I would have loved to see a hypothetical Battle Network 7 create challenges that take this insane level of customization into account. But alas, we still have work to do here. Base leaves behind the Bat Key, which we need to take to the end of the underground to find the Immortal area. Wow, you ascertained that, like, immediately. Here we have the Count of Ground-Soaking Blood, which even in Japanese is needlessly long and weird sounding. But even more weird is the translation of this section, which calls him Zap. This is almost certainly a misunderstanding of some kind. What I imagine happened is that the translator was given raw text files with no visuals, saw a character named Count, and just automatically assumed they were talking about Count Zap, an existing Battle Network character. This means that the Legacy Collection introduces a previously unseen grammatical error, which gives it the seal of approval as a true Battle Network game. Suck on this, you pale reprobate. Ah, crap. I hate when it does that. Well, howdy, Django. As was the case in Battle Network 4, we can't defeat the Count due to the darkness of the Immortal area. There's no sunlight to destroy a vampire this far down. Atenko, Django's companion, is capable of storing sunlight, but they've been locked away in the Undernet. You've likely seen them by now as you were completing other tasks, so it's just a matter of taking the solar key Django gives you to destroy the Count's barrier. Then you can bring Otenko back for another round. Once he's weakened by a sufficient amount of vitamin D, the Count is kind of a shame. He's a great looking boss. He's got a bunch of attacks, even blood pikes that rise from the ground that I was shocked weren't censored into a different color. When it comes down to it though, like Base before him, Mega Man's staggering OP-ness will let you effortlessly blast through bosses on your first attempt with no resistance. For our dimension hopping efforts, we get the Count's battle chip, unlock him as a ghost Navi just like the other bosses, and open up the path to Sanctuary. Sadly, Holy Dream isn't in this game, so it doesn't do us much good. The Graveyard is the post-game region I talked about a few minutes ago, the one that's blocked off halfway through by Mega Chip completion. But what's actually down here? Well, the first thing you'll find is a set of gravestones that are marked with the names of all the Navis from each entry, as well as an additional grave for all the spin-off Navis, which could arguably canonize them, I guess, but the post-games are pretty ambiguously canon in general, so don't worry about it. These don't do anything as far as I can see, they're just a slightly creepy Easter egg for fans who have played all the games. Samurai, man. Guys, come on, you translated his name wrong twice. If you want to actually get to all of these though, and the items that are near them, you're gonna have to clear out all these Navi barriers first, and there's 4 of them. This means you have to arrive with Mega Man the first time and realize you can't do anything, come back with a Link Navi, clear 2 paths, come back with another Link Navi, clear 2 more paths, then come back one more time with Mega Man to continue progressing, because again, the Link Navis are terrible compared to him, and you don't want to accidentally encounter some kind of post-game boss while playing as them. Once that's all cleared out, you can go through the door at the back that requires all the Mega Chips once you've got them, and there is no fucking way. On the other side of the library check is a few last upgrades alongside the Bug Frag Trader. Unlike Battle Network 3 and like Battle Network 4, you have to have full library completion to even get here, so who gives a shit? Oh, wonder of wonders, the super boss's base. Who could have possibly? This indeed does mean that the Count is the only extra boss in this game. Supposedly, Serenade was meant to be here as well, but was removed at the last second for either space or time reasons. Nothing new here, more health, stronger hits. I was challenging myself to see if I could beat him without program advances or busted combos, just through the sheer imbalance of Beast Out and the crosses. Took me a few attempts, but still not much of a problem. This ain't gonna work on him next time though. Base's defeat caused a reaction to spark in the gravestones around the room, summoning powerful Revenant clones of the bosses to awaken. At least, that's what I assume the RV stands for. These guys are all just bragging rights. No matter your rank, you get 3,000 Zenny, and that's all that will ever drop. They reset every time you leave, but beating them all in one sitting doesn't do anything either. So it's just a bonus challenge in case you don't think you fought the same bosses enough up until now. I actually found the final encounter by pure chance while filling out the PA library. That didn't go well. Having decided to take the Cybeast power for himself, Base absorbs a fragment of the Cybeast opposite of the one Mega has. He then summons the Navi Ghost of G-Beast or F-Beast Rockman to test you. This is gonna be a pain on your first few attempts. You have to fight the Beast every time before you can get to Base, and your HP remains constant across both fights. Beast Mega Man isn't particularly hard or unfair, it's just that by this point in power scaling, a single mistake will cost you a pretty slice of health that could be better used up against Base. So you gotta get good at taking out the Beast quick and clean to save yourself for the main event. Defeat the Beast Out Ghost, and Base, for the very last time, will grace us with his presence. And since this is our very last battle, I decided to make the choice to finally embrace the patch cards. This is gonna be my last chance to use them, so let's go all out. By combining these 4 patch cards with this Navicus layout and making sure everything balanced correctly, I was able to create a Mega Man with no bugs, air shoes, undershirt, 1670 HP, and a near instant charge shot. His greatest strength, though, is the mix of 2 custom +1s from the patch cards and the program chip shot Shuffle, which implements Search Soul's Folder Shuffle button into Mega Man's base skill set. This means that within 2 or 3 turns, I can search almost my entire folder. Add a full cust on top of this, and your preferred Giga Chip, and Program Advanced are basically free, unless you have extraordinarily bad luck, as I often do. Oh, and did I mention that this build also adds Roll Soul's Chip Recovery, meaning every battle chip used regenerates 20 HP. So as long as you have a battle chip, you essentially can't die, as you can buff yourself back up past the 1 HP undershirt threshold. Except for Shooting Buster, because it doesn't cause invincibility frames. I hate this scumfuck attack. So this build would have worked amazingly for everyone except Base BX. I just cannot get over how for 3 games in a row, the only reason the final version of Base isn't a complete joke is this one absurd attack that asks you to react a half dozen times in a row in a quarter of a second. And it's only hard on his final phase in each game because the attack gets faster each time he levels up. Well, as usual, time to cheat and just do the dumbest, easiest strat I can think of. Screw trying to play normally, I'm just gonna kill this jerk off before his frame check attack goes off too many times. You can always fill your folder with PAs and pray, as is always an option. Or, you still remember how Beast Out works, right? You can charge up null element chips to tear out a special attack, an attack that can be further altered based on your cross. So like, there isn't anything stopping you from filling your entire folder with null-typed asterisk chips, getting 5 free, powerful homing charge attacks every turn. Rock will even teleport to base to perform some of these attacks, avoiding whatever nonsense he's coating your field with, and he'll become stunned, stopping whatever bullcrap he happens to be doing. Oh, and you have to fight Gregar again. Unlike Duo or Nebula Gray, I have no commentary. I face tanked my way to a win on my first try using the Beast attack strategy, so he's not a big deal. I'll take my completion cutscene, thank you. Now just head back to the title screen. Why the fuck does that not say complete? I am not a happy operator right now. The Secret Library was a concept introduced in Battle Network 4. The purpose of it was to segregate the multiplayer or trading-related chips to their own section that would not affect 100% completion. An excellent idea, as it still allows one to finish the post-game and unlock everything, even if they don't have someone from the opposite version to trade with or to battle dozens and dozens of times. You see why I'm telling you this, right? None of the other games with a Secret Library require the Secret Library to be filled. Why does this one? The majority of the Secret Library is just the Navi chips from the opposing version. This can be easily accomplished in the Legacy Collection, as there's e-reader cards for each of the Link Navis in both games. Simple enough. But there are 2 other chips that go here I imagine an impossibly small amount of people have ever gotten legitimately. Atenko and Gundilsul EX. In the seaside area, there's a machine called the Boktai Trader. The only currency it accepts are crossover points. On the GBA, these can be earned by playing a special cross-battle mode with someone who owned Shin Bakura no Taiyo. As you would assume, there isn't any way to play the cross battles in the Legacy Collection. So rather than just give you infinite points or outright hand you the chips some other way, the crossover points were diverted to ranked matches. Only ranked matches, private matches give you nothing. This forces you to try and use the random matchmaking system to hopefully find ranked opponents, and I have a better chance of landing a foreign model than I have of finding a match in this fucking mode. Battle Network PvP isn't like Call of Duty or something. A very small number of the series fans routinely engage with the online battles. Then also take into account the fact that there's multiple rule toggles that affect who you can be matched with. Then also take into account the fact that there's no crossplay, so this already tiny player base is split into thirds. Then also take into account that the community that does take the PvP seriously all play with the Tango mod instead because it has rollback netcode. The connection in the Legacy Collection is also dumb luck peer-to-peer shit with a massive delay unless you know your enemy and know they're on LAN. Even if you do match with someone, they're probably clear across the planet playing on fucking Arby's Wi-Fi and half your inputs won't register. And even once you have all the points, the Boktai Trader is still random, with a disgustingly small chance of getting the 2 exclusive chips you need because the trader is filled with a bunch of easily obtainable bullshit from other parts of the game. This collection released in 2023. How are we still tying achievements to online play? And because of all that, I extend one last thank you to Gold Dragon, who just library compared with me so I could buy the stupid things. Otherwise, this video would have been delayed who knows how long as I endlessly refreshed the match finder. Well, certainly a whimper rather than a bang for this finale, huh? In terms of new content, there's basically nothing here. There's the count, and that's really it. And if you played the original English release, he wasn't even in the damn game, and 3 of the rooms were missing. So what do you even get? The Revenants and the Virus Battler? Oh, fucking pinch me. You'd be forgiven for believing this means I'm happy with Battle Network 6 for not wasting as much time and getting straight to the point then, right? But keep in mind that all the not fun stuff I mentioned from prior games doesn't go away. It's still here. Chip hunting, trying to get the correct ranks on bosses that are random encounters, spending ages searching for very specific codes of specific chips to fill out program advances, grinding bug frags. None of that stuff went away. It's all still here, filling up over 10 hours of my existence. And now there isn't even any new content as a reward. It's all grind. That's all that's here. 2 or 3 extra rooms and a bunch of story boss refights. And again, if you lived anywhere but Japan for like 15 years, you didn't even get that. So that's it. We did it. There were some fun areas, there were some cool bosses, but as a whole, oh boy. I know there's gonna be a ton of people who disagree with me about this entire video if they manage to stick it out this long. They'll say it isn't as bad as I made it out to be, or they had so much easier of a time with it. But you know, I think that's one of the most interesting parts of this whole thing. There will no doubt be people in the comments talking about their experiences with the post games and how much easier it was for them. And I believe them. That's the problem with so much of the bonus content being reliant on RNG. While I spent a half hour trying to get Shadow Man to spawn for a 3rd time, they might have gotten him to show up back to back. It's how this kind of thing is going to shape out. Time spent and personal stories will vary wildly because the entire postgame is decided by randomness. Library completion. It's library completion. I know I've already said it like 20 times, but I'm gonna fucking say it again. It's the joining flaw of all 6 games. New areas and challenges are great. New navies are cool. Rare chips are totally rad, man. Slowly filling up the stupid checklist by visiting very specific areas, then running for several minutes until the correct mob with a 3% appearance rate spawns, hoping to high hell you have the very specific sequence of battle chips you need, then make sure you get a certain rank for a chip to drop. If a chip drops at all, making sure that that chip is the correct code of a possible 4 because you'll need all the codes for program advances to finish the PA library. And partaking in this process on loop for several hours is never, ever fun. It makes the real new experiences seem worse because nothing could possibly make up for the 10 hours you squandered collecting all the chips. There is never an equal reward for the time you spent purposefully not enjoying yourself. If you're really that determined to go through and 100% these games, library compare with somebody on the Legacy Collection so you can just buy whatever chips you're missing. You might be able to squeeze some manner of enjoyment out of the post games if you don't have to play slots for 10 hours with a guide opened. Just let people go to the new post-game area, fight the new viruses and navies, battle the ghost version of each boss once or twice, and then fight base in the usual test of strength. Just, you know, don't make the base fight a crapshoot reflex test sometimes. Just stick with the base games. Don't pull back the curtain and stare at the diseased RNG underbelly barely holding the game's progression systems together. You'll enjoy Battle Network much more that way. Thank you so much to everyone who supported me up until this point, and a special thanks to every single one of my Patreons all throughout the past 2 or 3 years it's been open. This video literally would not exist without any of you. Thank you so much. If for some reason, after 2.5 hours or however long this video is, you're still not done hearing me talk, and you would like to help support the channel in future content creation endeavors, there is currently a half-hour long bonus video up on Patreon where I covered all 5 of the classic Game Boy Mega Man games. Part of an ongoing series I'm going to be doing for my $2 tier patrons, where I'll be covering as many Mega Man spin-offs and fan games and things as I could possibly find. Mega Man and Bass already won the vote for the next episode, so you also have that to look forward to if you join. But that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being with me through this arduous Battle Network saga, which isn't quite finished yet. There'll be a little bit more in the future. But for now, that is it for me today, guys. Thank you all once again. Have a great day, and bye-bye.